The legislature is back in session. I recognize Speaker Pangilinan.
Thank you, Sidismasi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that the body accept Bill number 184-31 LS as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, and it be placed in the third reading for discussion.
Okay, on the motion then to accept without any objections, so ordered.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, then this being the Supplemental Appropriations Act at the request of the Governor for fiscal year 2011, I would then move as required by our standing rules that we resolve to the Committee of the Whole for the discussion on the bill.
On the motion without any objection to resolve as a Committee of the Whole, without any objections, so ordered. We're going to, for just 1 minute, to take a recess and then set up. Thank you very much.
The Committee of the Whole is now convened. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the Committee of the Whole for the discussion of Bill number 184-31 LS as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land. The bill is a bill that was submitted by the Governor in its original form, sponsored by the Committee on Rules, Federal Foreign Affairs, Micronesian Affairs, and Human and Natural Resources at the request of the Magalaking Guam, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam. The bill sets up appropriations which the Governor had identified as being critical to fund services of the various departments and agencies of the Government of Guam. In addition, the bill also requested or identified revenue streams to fund the appropriations requested. The major component of the bill involved a appropriation to the general fund, basically, to fund operational shortfalls, of which the majority of about $12 million was for the health insurance benefits of the Government of Guam employees and retirees. The bill, originally as introduced by the Governor, identified the revenue source of approximately $15 million to be taken from the retirement fund by virtue of an offset for what was termed an overpayment to the retirement fund by the Government of Guam pursuant to Public Law 2838. During the public hearing, as testified by the retirement fund, they disputed this fact and this appropriation method of funding shortfalls in the Government of Guam, most especially the health insurance, through this recoupment of what the retirement fund termed as not a fact. During the public hearing, it was requested that the Governor and his fiscal management team identify an alternative funding should the legislature not accept the recoupment of this $15 million revenue source. Subsequent to the public hearing, of course, the retirement fund and the Governor of Guam and his staff met And we received a letter from the governor indicating that the proposal that the retirement fund presented to him, where he would not use the $15 million recoupment methodology, and instead would accept a reduction in the unfunded liability, in the reduction of the employer contribution to the retirement fund, a reduction of 6%, and the savings then be used by the governor to fund his requested appropriations in Bill 184. There were some other changes, of course, that were looked at, requested, and worked through with the body and the committee, which resulted in the substitute bill that you have before you. What I want to do at this time is allow the Office of Finance and Budget to just walk through the bill in its form and give you a perspective of what is being funded in the substitute bill, what was requested by the governor, the funding sources that will fund what is being presented to you in the substitute bill, and then from there we'll be able to then open up for questions or requests for any clarifications. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the Director of the Office of Finance and Budget, Mr. Chris Badassi, who will then walk us through the presentation of the substitute bill. Oh. Yes. Okay, we can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Senators. The presentation I'm about to give is just a few slides long, and what the presentation shows is it basically lines up the sections of the original Bill 184 on the left column and what sections were taken from the original Bill 184 and also put into the substitute version of Bill 184. And what it does is it organizes the information according to the substitute bill that's before you. So the first issue in the bill was from Section 3A, and that was the retirees' health insurance. Section 9 of the original Bill 184 had the health insurance for the line agencies, which is the health benefit cost fund. And then this is a typo, sorry, this should have been the Department of Education health insurance for $1.3 million. So overall total, and this was based on the public hearing where the Department of Education said they needed the $1.3 million to cover their health insurance. The total health insurance appropriation in the substitute bill taken directly from the original bill is $12.745 million. Now the funding sources as well were taken from the original Bill 184, Section 18, the Hay study, the transfer of the appropriation of the Hay study, $7.6 million. And then as you'll see in the bill, the agreement reached between the Government of Guam Retirement Fund and the administration regarding the retirement fund cash relief. It was in the original bill in Section 3C. Obviously that was in a form that wasn't acceptable to the fund and did not show up in the substitute version of the bill. That was the compromise agreement that you see here, and that 5.145 million of that is going to fund the health insurance. Okay. The next slide shows the new revenue sources identified in the original bill 184 and the ones that also appear in the substitute bill. These are actual new revenues that will be recognized within the bill. The first is reimbursements from the IRS for various tax credits, 5.2 million, and the Autonomous Agencies Collection Fund of 2.1 for a total of 7.3 million. Other funding sources identified in the original bill 184 that show up in the substitute are year 2010 census contract funds that are remaining available, $1 million. Reimbursement of capital costs from the Ledzon landfill reimbursement of $4.3 million. Bond reserve fund for the limited obligation infrastructure improvement bond 1997 Series A, which was refunded, $1 million. And retirement fund cash relief overhang of $665,000. So a combined total of about $14.2 million of new funding sources, some new revenue, some existing funds available for appropriation in the substitute version of Bill 184, and all of these were identified in the original Bill 184 as well. The next section talks about the Guam Memorial Hospital and their delinquent payments to the retirement fund. Section 3B of the original Bill 184 addressed this issue. There's a $5.25 million debt owed to the retirement fund for fiscal year 11 DB contributions and about a $1.372 million DC contribution available, or that owed to the fund from the retirement fund. Now there's people that today aren't able to retire because of this. This has been packaged into the bill, and you'll see it as a added on to the loan from what is known as Public Law 2838, which is an existing debt owed to the retirement fund by Guam Memorial Hospital and the Department of Education. So this will be added on to that arrangement, and it will allow employees from the hospital to begin retiring as a result of that.
If I may elaborate, this is for this current fiscal year, beginning October 1. Part of the agreement of the Guam Memorial Hospital with the retirement fund was that they pay current employer contribution. Because of the challenges faced by the hospital made a decision not to remit the employer contribution. And so they began then increasing what they owed to the hospital. And as of, I think, the last pay period, or retirement fund contribution due from the hospital, on the defined benefit side, they have run up another outstanding balance of 5.5 million. And so this was discussed of, we would now put this into a notes payable with the retirement fund, in which we would pay the interest payments on it out of the general fund to assist Guam Memorial Hospital. In addition, the hospital also is not paying the defined contribution plan of the money that they've taken out of the employee's paycheck. And so they're not remitting it to these retirement fund contribution, which means these employees are losing the interest, and nobody's able to retire because the agreement was everybody remain current. This money is going to be paid to the retirement fund on the defined contribution side by the decrease in the retirement fund rate to the retirement fund that was agreed to between the administration and the governor, so that 6% reduction will allow them to take that savings and pay the employee contribution of the defined contribution plans and have them make those employees whole, basically. So that's the cash flow relief provided to GMH, but it goes back to the employees, which I think is very essential, most especially for the defined contribution plan.
Next slide you see are all the sections of Section 4 of the original bill, and it also includes Section 10. These are additional expenditures for the executive branch operations. These are all requests for appropriations in the original Bill 184. In one form or another, these all appear in the substitute version of Bill 184.
Yes, Senator Cruz?
On that list,
Yes.
I have some concerns with that because I looked at the last report that was submitted by the Director of Administration. I think it's dated May the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
I have a thumb drive if you want to put it on.
Okay.
And I have problems because as I look at the report,
Go ahead.
none of those departments are showing that deficit.
Okay.
They're all showing a positive amount of money. Like as of the 30th of April, all of them had sufficient funds to carry them. I don't know where the shortfall is coming from. Have you been able to determine what the shortfall is with the last report that was sent to us by the Director of Administration?
What we did, Senator, is in your committee report, you will find a table that looks like this. It's a one page, and it's in the back as an attachment. You know, the governor keeps saying that if we don't pass his additional funding requirements, that the government's going to shut down because he's going to run out of not even cash, he's saying, out of spending authority, out of appropriation authority. This table shows the what was spent in fiscal year 2010 to operate those departments and agencies. In addition, the second table, the middle table, shows the appropriation given to those departments and agencies for this fiscal year, the total appropriation. And then the third shows you a difference between what it costs to run that agency in 2010 that did not shut down, that there was no shutdown in 2010, and what is the difference in the appropriation between 2010, 2011, where the governor's saying he's going to shut down. So if you look, for example, at that first request, in FY 2010, the Department of Public Works, for example, received a total appropriation of $21,630,435, and they were able to run through the year with no shutdown. In FY 2007, you will see that the appropriation given to Department of Public Works is $24,477,408, which shows that they received $2.8,846,973 more than 2010. So I can't reconcile the governor saying that, for example, if we don't give DPW $400,000, which he's requesting, that the entire agency is going to shut down or the entire government is going to shut down. How can it that they have $2.8 million more this fiscal year than last fiscal year? They didn't shut down last fiscal year, but this fiscal year, with $2.8 million more, they're going to have to close. It just doesn't reconcile, and that's why I've always said, we need the details behind the press releases. Why do they issue a press release that says, we're asking for $400,000 for public works, and if we don't get it, we're going to shut them down? This information, by the way, is generated by BBMR, by DOA, and by the administration. So rather than, I certainly agree with you, Senator, that it doesn't jive. The reports we're getting from what we look at and the press releases just are not matching. And you will see. Now, in some cases, there is, in fact, going to be a shortfall that is identified, and you will see that, for example, at the fire department. We see that there will be a shortage in the fire department, and that there is a difference in the appropriation level from 2003 and 2010 and 2011. And where there are shortfalls there, we are making the appropriation as requested by the governor to resolve those. In the past, when you have these smaller shortfalls, the solution that has been implemented by administrations and governors has been to exercise their transfer authority. And so there will be many, as you have seen in the reports, and perhaps after we walk through the bill, we may just come and ask maybe just BBMR, who is involved, and DOA, to respond to those questions, maybe, Mr. Chair. But and you know, if you want to point out others, you certainly are welcome to do so.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying that maybe in September they may have a shortfall.
That's correct.
But if you were to listen to the news releases today
Right.
and the statements, the layoffs are yesterday and
Right.
today and tomorrow, not. And I'm just trying to get a good sense of how accurate these are.
Yes.
And then I wanted to also get, because I remember fire when they came in.
Yes.
The same thing with them when they were doing their testimony. I asked, how much do you need? How much did you spend last year?
Right.
And it was short. And I asked them again, how much do you need? And they kept insisting, oh,
We'll make
we're
it
going to
work.
get, yeah, there'll be, where we received assurances we're going to get a transfer authority.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, is this next budget that's going to be presented to us going to come in with the actuals that are spent over the last several years so that we know what it's going to cost and we don't have these shortfalls? Or are we going to continue to try to have the charade of a balanced budget, knowing that we're not going to have it, and we're going to have to do these supplementals 3/4 of the way through the year? Because when we asked them how much they needed, they insisted that the amount that they set forth was what they wanted, but none of the last 3 years have shown that that was the amount that they've actually spent, but they weren't willing to come forward with insisting that it should be a different amount.
Yeah. Well, we just got the detailed budgets from the administration, and we will run those numbers during the budget presentation and show you actual expenditures, what the budget request is, and give you the same kind of picture that we're giving you with this of 2011 versus the requested. We'll give you 2010, 2011, and the requested amounts for 2012.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get a better understanding of, is this anticipated in September, or is it actual crisis time June 3rd?
The assessment of the committee is that no department will run out of authority to pay their personnel and operating expenses by June 3rd. There will be none, not even by June 30th, not even by July 15th. But the areas that we have identified where there will be in September or late August, we are resolving by providing the appropriation as requested by the governor.
Because as I look at the report from May the 20th, the only negative, or at least bracketed amount for operations is bank fees.
That's correct, yes.
And bank fees over the last several months have ranged from 19 million to now, I'm not sure how much it should be.
Yes.
And Department of Administration has been the one that's been bracketed for the last 3 months, and I don't see them getting any Well,
No, we are giving them a little bit.
all right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator. Okay. Mr. Badassi?
Okay. So just reiterating on this chart, these are all the additional appropriation requests by agency that were in the original Bill 184. Everything on this list here is funded within the new Bill 184 with the exception of the bank fees. The next slide shows additional miscellaneous expenditures from the original Bill 184 request, sections 5 through 8, supplemental annuity, Medicare premiums, pensions. All of these things appear in the substitute version of Bill 184. There were 3 items that were listed as prior year expenditures in the original Bill 184, and the funding is in the bill for the overtime for Police Department and the Department of Corrections. The following list is what we considered new expenditures. These were things that were not in the original budget when passed, Public Law 3196 or the amended version. All of these things, with the exception of the Department of Revenue and Tax, are not in the substitute version of the bill. So the Department of Revenue and Tax is in the bill, but the other 4 are not.
Yeah, and again, the governor was requesting and said he needed additional spending authority to cover operational shortfalls of existing operations of the government of Guam. In addition to that, he submitted new projects basically that are not funded, so there's no shortfall. They've never been started, and so there were brand new expenditures. And given the fact that, we are finding ourselves in shortfalls, we made a policy call on the committee level that since we're funding shortfalls, because we don't have enough revenue, why are we going to increase new programs at this time? And that given that there is a current budget for the next fiscal year, and there's only 3 or 4 months left in the fiscal year, why increase the funding level this fiscal year for these new projects? That we think that it would be more appropriate that when we discuss new spending initiatives, that we would do that in the new bill for the new fiscal year, rather than increasing them in this fiscal year. And so the 3 areas were the Bureau of Information, all related to technology expenditures. And so we decided that given the revenue levels that were identified also, that it would be more, from the committee perspective, we decided to remove new expenditures, new authorizations, and cover just the existing authorizations and the shortfalls identified by the governor. And that really is the bill as substituted that shows where those levels are funded. Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, in this handout that you gave us,
Yes.
on the first page, you show us how much is needed for the health insurance.
Correct.
And in the bottom, you provide where the funding sources are going to be to pay for that.
Correct.
On the subsequent pages,
Yes.
on the second page, the cost of new revenue source of the amounts that are needed for the departments.
Yes.
Where is that coming from? What's the funding source? Is that earlier or?
It's from the different from these revenue source. So for the appropriations to the operations for the departments and agencies, they will come out of the revenue from the reimbursement from the IRS, the Autonomous Agency Collections Fund, the census. So the 7 million, 7.3 from those from which the governor identified, plus the 6.9 from the other revenue sources, those are the funding source for the shortfalls requested by the governor and funded in this bill. So that's the source of those appropriations. Yes, and so what you have in a portion of the bill here is that in order to ensure that we are spending the money as appropriated by the governor from the revenue source that has been identified, we set up a supplemental act revenue fund. So all of the funding sources in this supplemental budget, all of the revenues are accounted for in this special fund that transfers these appropriations into that fund. And then the expenditures are paid out of that fund. And that allows us to track the appropriations and the release of this and compare them against the revenue that have been identified to support these additional appropriations. So it allows for transparency and accountability as requested by the governor, that he has identified the revenue source from where these additional expenditure authorities will be paid from. And so we set up this special or the supplemental appropriations revenue fund that tracks the two so that we know we're spending the appropriations as funded by the governor.
So all the subsequent pages would add up to 14 million?
That's correct. It should. It should. Okay. Any other questions? Senator Guthertz, Senator Mabini, and then Speaker Wampet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification on prior year expenditures. The governor requested for Guam Police Department about $338,000, Department of Corrections $1,685,000, and then we have COLA $1 million. Is that reflected in the substitute bill, the COLA, also?
Yes, the governor had put in his request $1 million, and we have provided funding for. Right. This is just
The annual COLA,
right. No, this is actually for the court case.
the court case COLA.
Yes. So we owe him 18 million.
Yeah.
But the governor had put in $1 million to go towards that 18, basically. And
Thank you.
so we honored that request and that appropriation.
Thank you.
Follow up to that question, Senator Cruz?
No, just, my abacus is a little broken.
Okay.
You're showing $12 million about 14 million in new funding sources, right?
Yes.
And if we look at the expenditures, the 14 agencies account for 12, 6 for the additional expenditures, so that's 12 and 6.
Go ahead.
4 for rev and tax, that makes it 13. And how do we count for the 3 for prior year expenditures? If my math is correct, that comes out to...
All of the things that were listed weren't necessarily funded in the bill. So the bank fees are in that group that you're talking about, so you have to deduct the 1.9. So, but I can give you aggregates. So in the aggregate, critical or the appropriations funded in the bill amount to $15,363,076. That's other than health insurance. That's funded within the bill.
But in the additional expenditures, you're only showing 1223.
Well, some of them are like the GMH is counted for the DC contributions.
No,
So-
but on that second page, not...
Okay. Sorry.
Additional expenditures for executive operations.
Okay,
The hospital is on a separate page.
correct.
The additional expenditures for executive operations is 12 by itself. The additional miscellaneous is 6.
Okay.
Rev and tax is 4. So that makes 13. Plus 3 comes to 16, and you're only showing
We got, oh,
Oh, the prior year expenditures, Chris?
yes, the prior
It's
year.
not adding up for me.
Right,
Okay.
because the,
Should we do a summary sheet? You want to do a summary sheet?
yeah.
That just shows what's in the
On page 2, you're showing 14 in revenue sources identified. But in the subsequent pages, I mean, if we take out GMH and we just add what is on the executive, that's 12 plus 6, 12.6 plus 4 is 13, and then you add the 3 for the prior year, comes to 16, just roughly. I'm short 3 in my, unless it's new math.
No, hold on.
No, I know. It's 12 and then 600 is 12,000,006 plus 4 makes it 13 plus 3 makes it 16. And the new funding sources only come out to 14. It's 14.2 and we're over 16 in the appropriations.
Sorry. There's things that are in this new substitute bill that were not in the governor's bill that are funded. That's the difference.
I understand, but then how,
The revenue is 13, but expenditures are 15.
no, the expenditures are 16.
No, well, part of the funding is also coming from the savings from the retirement fund that were identified as
That
well.
was all used in the first one.
I think what we're doing is, there's,
You used 5.1
Yes.
from the retirement fund for the,
Some things aren't funded.
for the health insurance, and you used the balance of it, the 1.6, for GMH, you had to make the upfront payments.
Yeah, but it'd be easier if we could just do a summary.
we'll do the summary sheet that will show you that they do balance, and when if we go through the bill, you'll see that we have allowed, for example, there are some things that the governor's now going to be able to use transfer authority to fund, and he's going to have to work with that, I think, in order to make the entire, to allow him to fund some of the smaller shortfalls that have been identified. But we'll prepare a summary sheet for you. I'm sorry, then, Senator Mabini?
Just for clarification, on page 3, regarding the GMH retirement fund,
Yes.
just for clarification, the second line on the bottom portion, the DC delinquent payments funding, so those are just the addition between, I mean, it came out to 6,552,000. Is that the addition between the DB contributions above and the retirement fund cash relief? Is that, if you could explain that?
Yes, sir.
Talking about the 1.026
Yeah,
million?
what beneath that?
Yeah, that shouldn't be there.
Oh,
Well, it has nothing to do with it?
Yeah, that's a carry-on.
Okay.
Just to disregard that.
okay. Speaker Wampak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to, also for clarification purposes, because when Chris was explaining it, he was just going down because he knew what he was talking about, but I was trying to write down exactly which ones of these are on the original bill. So if you go to the second page where new revenue sources have been identified, so we're section 19, reimbursements from IRS, that's in the original bill.
That's in the original.
And
That's, section 19 is the original, is the section in the original bill as submitted by the governor.
Okay, and what about section 23, the Autonomous Agency Collections Fund of 2.1 million?
Again, that was in the original
In the
bill.
original.
Section 23 identified that funding source.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to
Yes.
go down. Section 20, the census contract funds, that's in the original bill as well?
Yes,
Now, section 21 is the reimbursement of capital costs from the La John landfill, and this is actually from Bill 155 that he vetoed?
right, but when the governor introduced his bill, he put this in there in section 21. That's why.
Oh, so that's why.
That's why he
had
vetoed the bill, so that he could use it in this bill. And I am graciously working with him.
And that's why I didn't make the motion this morning to override
I
then
know,
the
I would
governor's
love
veto.
to override that, but
Okay, and then the series, the bond series, Series A, 22, that too is in the original.
yes,
And section 3B, the retirement fund cash relief is also original.
that's correct.
Okay, so in essence then, because I think this is really important, I think, for the public to know, is that if you look on page 1, at least everything that we're seeing here are, in essence then, in the original bill.
That's-
Page 1.
That's correct.
And then all of the new revenue sources that are identified that we're using in this budget also are in the governor's original bill.
That's correct.
And page 3 for the hospital now.
Right.
You said the DB contributions, that's in the original?
Yes, but in the original bill, this was going to be funded from that 15 million. So we recognize that we are folding this and accounting for the payment of this, but since the new agreement between the retirement fund and the governor is not 15, it's only 7 or 6.9 million, and we're using that for the health insurance. The approach we have to funding this is to roll it into Public Law 2838, and it becomes part of that interest-only payments. So it doesn't get paid from the retirement fund, because the original one in the retirement fund was 15 million, but it's 15 million is no longer available. So instead of not making any payments for GMH, we've decided to add it to the current money owed by GMH. And then we're paying the interest payments on that so that the people can retire by bringing them current.
So will this two sections then, for the DB and the DC contributions for the Guam Memorial Hospital, their delinquent payments into the retirement fund, will language then be reflected in the bill that these dollar amounts will go directly to the retirement fund and not to the hospital to remit to the retirement fund? Because
Yes.
they've withheld
No.
paying these.
Yeah, you'll see how that is treated in the bill when we go through the bill. So, and that is in section, actually it's in section, I'm sorry.
Well, you don't have to look for it now, but when we do get to that particular section, when we get to the bill, though, that if you can just highlight that,
Yes,
let us know about it then, so that I'll be able to.
right, you'll
put
you'll
that-
see how that is treated.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions on the presentation? Senator Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if we can just get some clarification also. The governor has been talking about a 36 million shortfall, right? And so the bill that he submitted, 184, is apparently to cover that shortfall.
That's correct.
I'm correct. So the substituted now version, how much does that cover? Because I noticed that we took out some sections of that, right? Because these have nothing to do with what is short. These are new.
That's right.
That's right. So what is the bottom line?
The bottom line,
The bottom line is 28,108,774. And part of the original 36 million was actually 7.6, which was the debt to GMH,
Right.
which is being repackaged as a loan. And
Right.
so you can pretty much take that down from the 36.6.
so
And it-
Okay.
the 36 included the governor paying off 7 million in GMH debt from the 15 million recoupment. And so because there's no recoupment, we don't have that 7 million to pay, so you reduce this 36 by the 7, which brings you just about 29 million. And we are still making payment on the GMH debt, but it's not a cash payment. We're making it as part of the current loan that the government of Guam has with the retirement fund for DOE and GMH. So we now add that 7 million to the GMH debt and are making interest payments on that. So that's the difference between the 36 and the 28 million here. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we'll go ahead then and go through the bill. Okay. Once again, on page, beginning with the bill, and again, it's the bill number 184-31 LS, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance. Chapter 1 is the health insurance, and in the findings and intent, it basically maps out the sequence of events that have led to this shortfall from the time the budget, the contract negotiations, the finalization of the contract, the signing of the contract, when the budget was signed, and all of the efforts to try and resolve this issue with regards to the health insurance shortfall. And then, of course, the operative language begins on page 5, which is section 4. Page 3, section 4, section 3, page 4. So the Hay study appropriation is an outstanding, there's a balance on the Hay appropriation. And section 3 of the bill allows the governor the ability to transfer that appropriation to the health insurance benefit fund for the payment of the health insurance premiums. And so, and it also sets up the total additional amount, which is 12.745698. And of that $12 million, the appropriation is allowed to be transferred for the GovGuam retirees health insurance premium, which will amount to $8,142,267. The health benefits cost account, which is the account set up for all the line agencies that we did in the budget bill, and 3.3 million of that will go towards that account for the payment of the premiums. And then the Department of Education is getting 1.3 million as requested by DOE and the governor, for a total amount of $12.7 million, which is the shortfall. And the amount being transferred from the health benefits fund is $7.6 million. Any questions on that? Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, earlier in response to a question that was raised, your answer was that you're being gracious and trying to work with the governor. And I think that's what all of us are trying to do here, and that's certainly what you're trying to do as Appropriations Chairman. I just want to state for the record, Mr. Chairman, that I'm pleased that you pointed out that the really, when you get past the issues of why we're in this situation, what the governor really needs is what you highlighted in Section 1. He needs a spending authority to continue the current health insurance contract. And I want to make this appeal to the governor, Mr. Chairman. I know he's watching. I know he's listening. His administration is certainly here. I see the BBMR director and coincidentally acting director. Gita is here, Carl Pangilinan, and other folks from the administration that has been monitoring during this process very closely. I want to make an appeal to the governor, Mr. Chairman, to really just stop the fear-mongering and letting all these GovGuam employees feel like they're on the verge of a government shutdown if the legislature doesn't take any action. I would go on record to say that the budget bill that you've spearheaded and presided over, that we all supported, or at least most of us supported in this room, really has statutory mechanisms to allow him to carry and address those shortfalls in some agencies by monitoring the cash that he has. I think you're being too gracious by, at this point, not giving us the benefit of publicly telling your story, our story, although you've successfully highlighted this in the findings and intent. And it's very clear, Mr. Chairman, that the current health insurance situation is the reason why the governor suspended the Hay salary adjustments, which are budgeted. And there's about $9 million left that there's no reason why those government of Guam employees had to forego not having their salary adjustment pursuant to law and pursuant to an executive order by the previous administration. And I would like to generate some discussion at this point, not to perpetuate or further the divide between the perceived divide between the legislature and the administration, but I know our government of Guam employees are also listening. And I want to make a statement to them that in no way, no how this government will be shut down. You could see by the presentation made by the Office of Finance and Budget what those 6 agencies' shortfalls are, if any, and how the governor could have resolved that internally. But instead, he chose to wrap 23,000 people and their families around an issue to which what he was most concerned about, as to whether or not the current health insurance contract will continue. And there's no doubt that it would continue, Mr. Chairman, because it's a contractual obligation. And the governor, as the public auditor, recommended that he should renegotiate that current contract. He refused to do so. He also said, while he was running for governor, that he would increase the governor of Guam's contribution to help alleviate the high cost of the premium. He also said, Mr. Chairman, that he would continue the Hay study salary adjustments to help alleviate that, and he didn't do any of those 3 things that we would have really seen to prevent us from being in this situation. And so I'm just pleading with you, Mr. Chairman, if you could just, I know how to read, and it's not very long, but if you could just recap for us from your perspective, and notwithstanding the rules of the Committee of the Whole, I think you should be given the latitude to make this explanation so that our story can be told.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicia. I appreciate that opportunity. As we all know, of course, the problem presented with regards to the current fiscal year's budget are what we will call the unbudgeted item, of which the largest amount is for the health insurance benefit. After the negotiations were completed, on August 26. The budget was passed on August 20. And so when the budget was passed, we did not include the new insurance rates because they were not finalized till August 26. And even on August 26, there was no final number because the contract itself had not been signed. The governor could have, after the presentation of the contract to him, could have rejected that contract, and so we would not have known what that amount was. The governor signed a contract in September, almost 28th, I believe, a month after the budget was passed and almost 3 weeks after the budget was signed, because the budget was signed in September 1st of 2011. And so when we finally got the final cost of the health insurance and calculated it based upon the enrollments and everything else, it was determined that the additional costs above what was appropriated in this fiscal year's budget originally was approximately $20 million total for the entire government of Guam. That included the autonomous agencies. The impact to the budget for the line agencies was approximately $16 million, and that's the appropriation level we're trying to cover. And so that is really, the problem we face. We are way past who knew what, who knew when. Where we're at today is that we are in a place was if we do not cover this amount in this fashion at this time, then we run the risk of the health insurance contracts for the government employees and retirees of being canceled for non-payment. We are in the middle of negotiations with, or will embark on negotiating with new carriers. And in order to attract new carriers, if you don't pay your health insurance bill, they're not going to have any confidence in the next fiscal year, and we're not going to get the participation level we want to ensure greater competition. Because they're going to say, well, if you don't pay your bill, I don't want to do business with you. So, but that's secondary. The primary concern is that our retirees and employees and their families need health care, utilize the health care, and if we don't resolve it by providing the additional appropriation or spending authority for the governor, we run the risk of not having health care for our retirees. So that is really the what is driving this supplemental budget. And in addition to that, the other areas of concern identified by the governor we've looked at, and we have agreed that we will resolve those areas of concern for the operations of this government. So that really, Mr. Chairman, is where we're at, and I thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
And I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Chairman, because really I was watching the news last night, and the governor he must be angry about something, and he just, I know it's not, it's unbecoming a governor or any governor to just call people out and say that these people didn't vote for him or support him. He even said that he wasn't in the majority, he was in the minority. He wasn't even Ways and Means chairman. He even mentioned that he was not a Ben Pangilinan or a Chris Badasi, and so that he was really at an arm's length from this contract and explaining from his perspective why the situation, why we find ourselves in this situation. But I also wanted to take this other opportunity for the public record that I have the utmost confidence in your OFB director, Mr. Badasi, and that he will never, ever commit or bind the legislature as what the administration is saying, that he knew about this increase and that he said, go ahead and the legislature will take care of it. Mm-hmm. And for the record, I know, I imagine how much pressure that must be on Mr. Badasi to have to face, his family and friends and his own credibility being put on the line and being put to test. But I want to publicly say that I have the utmost confidence in that individual, and he would have never, ever, Mr. Chairman, say that. And as a senator and a member of this legislature who's privy to a lot of the information here, like all of us, there was never any discussion of a need to increase the health preparations for the health insurance for this current fiscal year. And so this discussion is very important. So we could say this is what it is, and that we're sending our own message out to the hardworking Government of Guam employees and their families that the situation purported by ADLUB is not really the case, and that as they send us emails saying, please, I'm concerned for my family and I don't want to be laid off. And the other thing with layoffs, we know that they're first in, last out. Sorry, last in, first out, rather. So if the governor were to initiate a layoff proceedings, the only people that he would be laying off were the people he more than likely hired beginning in January. So then is the governor really concerned for the thousands and thousands of Government of Guam employees and their families, or is he just concerned to protect those people that he just recently hired and brought into the Government of Guam? Thank you also for the opportunity to tell that side of the story.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. I truly appreciate your comments, most especially as related to my staff. And, you know, we are where we're at, as everybody understands, and we are trying to assist in dealing with this problem. So I truly appreciate that. If there's no further question on Section 3, Section 4 of the bill is, since the total amount required for health insurance is $12 million, the Hay appropriations balance remaining is only 7.6, so we need to find additional money. And this is the section that implements the agreement between the Guam Retirement Fund and the governor with regards to the cash flow relief to the government of Guam. And so Section 3 gives you the reduction in the employer contribution. The current requirement is 27.46, and Section 4 reduces that 27.6 by 6% to 21.44%, yielding a cash flow savings and relief to the general fund of $6.8 million. Of that money, then, by the way, in order not to harm the retirement fund any further from this cash flow relief, the autonomous agencies and those departments and agencies that do not receive contributions from the general fund will continue to pay the 27.46 rate. So for those agencies, they will continue to do that, and the cash flow relief is granted to the line agencies receiving general fund. Senator Palacios?
Mr. Chairman, would this then translate into a reduction by the same amount to the total benefit of the executive line employee? Because if the government is only to contribute 21.44% and not the 27, then it will be that much less contribution toward the employee's total benefit during this period of lower rate.
No, it would not, because this is the contribution for the unfunded liability portion. So this is to reduce that on the unfunded liability contribution portion, not the benefit contribution portion. So this will not result in a lesser annuity calculation.
That's what I want. That's
right.
What I want to know.
It will not affect the annuity that the employee will be eligible for upon retirement.
So what happened then to the difference of about 6%?
That money then is what the governor's requesting to use to pay the health insurance.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz?
I know we're going through this section by section, but I was still trying to make out my math, and I thank you for the breakdown that you gave us.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Chair, I hate to ask this question, but I must. On page 2, was there a reason why in new revenue sources identified we did not put down that we were taking money from the Tourist Attraction Fund Reserve?
Yes, it is. It's in the...
It's not on this.
It's Section 22, Bond Reserve Fund for LO Infrastructure Improvement Bond 1997 Series A. That is the TAF Bond Reserve Fund. That $1 million?
Yeah.
That is, yes, that's the TAF bond that's been paid off, in which, you know, we have to have a bond debt service reserve fund, and according to GITA, that money is now available because the bonds have been paid off, and that reserve is no longer required.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think that's,
That's how it was referenced by the
he is
government.
saying okay, I'm just wondering
Yes.
if GVB is saying okay, because
Right,
my chairman is not here and I'm her vice chair.
I
I
understand.
have to look out for TAF, so.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to hide it that it's from TAF, but that's how it was referred to. Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to recognize you also as well with regard to Section 3. And just so discussion purposes, this section will also be applied to the judiciary. As you know, I recently had an idea yesterday that if the governor can make this agreement with the Retirement Fund Board Chair, former Speaker San Augustine, to reduce the executive branch's contribution by 6%, and that if he does the same for the judiciary, then that will result in a corresponding cost avoidance for the judiciary, which they would not have to pay to the retirement fund, so instead they would be able to apply to their shortfalls. And then in having a discussion with you and with our colleagues here, I guess the trick then will be that the governor has to maintain the current allotment levels. Otherwise, if the governor sees that there's going to be about $325,000 less that the judiciary has to remit to the retirement fund, he might, through the allotment process, withhold that from them. So in the end, they would not be seeing this money.
Right, but the legislature is not reducing the appropriation.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I
correct.
was going to point out too, that
Yeah.
the appropriated level to the judiciary is not being
Remains the same.
reduced by that amount. So the trick is the allotment process again. And so I want to thank you for having this kind of amendment, which also extends that much needed relief to the judiciary.
Right. And again, this is only for the remaining 4 months of this fiscal year.
And so theoretically, the judiciary will be going based on its appropriated level and looking at its projected expenditure outlay, and then they can say that their shortfall shall theoretically could be reduced by $325,000.
That's correct.
That's the final amount.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And so the reduction in the savings, $5.1 million will go then towards the balance needed to fully fund the shortfall for the health insurance. And once again, it's this $5 million is allocated according to the appropriation for the different cost centers for the health insurance, the retirees, the health benefits cost fund, and the Department of Education. Now, Section E of that, of this Section 4, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Blas, and then Speaker Wampat.
So, Mr. Chair, along those lines and along with the presentation by the senator from Agana Heights, the 5.1 is just the executive branch. That's the total amount of that the cost savings, cost realization with regards to the executive branch reduction in the retirement.
Executive branch and agencies of the government of Guam receiving general fund appropriation. So, University of Guam will get its reduction.
Right.
GCC will get its reduction. The judiciary will get its reduction.
So is the judiciary's part of the 5.1?
The amount is correct. So, in order for the judiciary to retain their savings, then they have to work that out with the governor. But their payment to the retirement fund will be reduced.
Okay.
Can I just give a point of information? The governor has already publicly supported
Right.
that idea to help alleviate
judiciary.
the shortfalls for the judiciary. So,
He,
because we're like the chairman said, this bill does not reduce the appropriated level of the judiciary.
That's understood.
So the governor is going to have to go on, going to defend why he's reducing their allotments by this amount. Because it doesn't also say to reduce their allotment.
no, it does not.
Yeah, it doesn't deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Speaker Wampat.
On the same line, though, I'm looking at the letter from the director, Paula Blas, on page 2. She said that the savings here for this period between May to September would be 6.02%. You're right. And I thought the dollar, and you mentioned earlier that the dollar amount was $6.8 million in savings.
Yes.
But but what is reflected here in D,
Right.
line 7 on page 6, is $5.1 million. So where are we realizing the additional amount to come up to 6.8 million?
The
as a
additional
savings?
amount goes to fund the other requests by the governor, because we need that. The new revenue source, exclusive of the entire reduction, will be short by that amount. So the approximately $700,000 that is the balance from this is used in the other appropriations to make it balance.
But so just for the retirement to get this reduction from 27 to 21% is actually $5.1 million.
No, the total.
Not 6.8.
No, the total savings is 6.8.
It's 6.8.
The remaining dollars are on page 6 in subsection E. It's on the very next page.
See, the
What-
6.8 includes GMH.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Now I see. Well,
Yeah.
all right.
And so section E then, GMH also get its contribution level reduced. And what section E does is it takes that savings for GMH and directs it to pay for the defined contribution that they are behind for the employees. No, the amount owed under the defined contribution of the savings by GMH of $1,026,000 is now given to the retirement fund to make them current for the employees of the defined contribution plan. So the relief to GMH is about $1 million in the contribution level. But instead of taking that for the general fund expenditures, we're letting GMH keep that amount, and they send it to the retirement fund to make current the defined contribution employees, which they have not paid since the beginning of the fiscal year. And as a matter of fact, the total amount outstanding for defined contribution is $1.3 million. And so we're taking that million of savings and saying, give that, but GMH, you still have to find an additional $300,000 to make this, to pay this all off by September 30 from, in order to ensure that those employees, remember the defined contribution, that's their only retirement, is that money plus the interest. And if they're not getting the money in to invest, they're not earning any interest. So that's the difference, Speaker, between, you're right, between the 6.8 and the 5.1 that we're appropriating to them. So.
And the language that you have here to protect, of course, the employees, the employer contribution rather, for retirement, it says here then that it will be remitted instead directly to the retirement fund.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So that is the reduction of the contribution rate and where it is applied. Senator Rodriguez.
Yes, I understand this is something that everyone supports, this concept of the reduction of 6% for 4 months. What are the consequences of that? I know earlier Senator Palacios asked something similar. What are the consequences of that reduction of 6% to the employee?
The consequences, really the way we did this, what we did, the original agreement was that there would just now be $6 million less than the retirement fund would have to invest. And the consequences is they lose the $6 million of contributions and any interest earned on that $6 million. What we have done in the committee, because of the continual growth, and that's what contributes to the unfunded liability, So you'll see in the next sections that what we have done with that $6 million is we've actually, again, added that as a payable to the retirement fund, and are paying interest to the retirement fund on that. And when we go out for the new deficit bond that the governor's proposing, that be part of the borrowing to remit that $6 million back to the retirement fund.
Okay.
So it doesn't
Okay.
really harm the retirement fund the way we've put it in here.
Okay, good, because that's, I know that I spoke to some retirees, and that's their concern.
Yes.
Is that we are reducing it,
Right.
you know, knowing that it's a compromise,
Yes.
because it's either that or employees don't get paid, right?
Right.
So, but I like that idea that it's something that we recognize would be paid back to the retirement
Yes.
fund. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So Section 6 of the bill is the amendment to Public Law 2838, which then allows the outstanding balance for this fiscal year of $5.5 million that GMH owes the retirement fund. That puts it into the amount owed by GMH, adds it to the current liability, and then we pay interest on that. B of that is exactly your question, Senator Rodriguez, is the $6.8 million that is being forgone will now be also paid interest on, and when we go out for the next bond, will be repaid to the retirement fund. So it keeps them whole. Okay? Chapter 2 of the bill is the supplemental revenues and appropriations. And this is where you'll see the creation of what we call the Supplemental Appropriations Act Fund. And this allows us to track the money that's being added on for the new expenditures and the revenue source that's being funded, and then all of the new expenditures are going to be charged against this new revenue source in this new account. Rather than just growing the general fund, we kind of separate this supplemental appropriation, an additional appropriation and additional expenditures. So it creates the fund. The fund is administered, of course, by DOA. There's an annual audit, and then it accounts for the deposit of the new revenues into this fund. And that would be, for example, your state of legal residency. All of the new revenues that you saw identified are now deposited into this fund for accountability and audit purpose. And then, once that's done, then we appropriate the money now to the request by the governor for these operational shortfalls. And the appropriations begin with Section 9, beginning with mental health. That's on page 13. $153,000, as requested by the governor, is being appropriated to the Department of Mental Health into Object Class 111, and that's salaries. In addition, the total request by mental health included $1.5 million, and these are for contracts right now that mental health has with service providers for group homes. The first service provider is the Laddie Treatment Center, and these are for the remaining 4 months of this fiscal year, and this was presented to us by the Department of Mental Health. $299,000 for the Laddie Treatment Center. The Catholic Social Services has a contract, and $945,000 is needed for the group homes that they run for the remainder of this fiscal year. And then there's another group home that is run by the Laddie Treatment Center, and $340,000 is required for that. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why is this money, the permanent injunction stuff, all of that money, I mean, that is so much money. How come that money doesn't help with this?
This money these contracts are paid for out of their current operational budget. That's why it's not included as part of the deposits to the federal district court. So these are regular things that are being paid for out of their annual budget.
Yeah.
But the millions of dollars that the government is paying to them is also coming out of current budget, is it not?
Correct.
So I don't understand why, you know, I'm so aggravated by that whole situation because as we continue to invest millions and millions, nothing's really happening. And, you know, and when I see all of this, you know, these families are really suffering. We get calls all the time that they're being told there are no services because there's no, you know,
Right.
payment and stuff. And, you know, Speaker Ben, I don't understand why. I mean, I just heard your answer, sir, but I don't understand why. When that bank amount is growing, but yet it doesn't seem right to me.
That's one of the reasons why I actually sent a letter to the governor 2 or 3 times asking him to request that the court defer the deposits to the permanent injunction because they already have $5 million in the bank. And they actually want an additional $5 million almost for the rest of this fiscal year. And I'm saying to the governor, they can't even spend that $5 million, you know, for the rest of this fiscal year. Request through a motion with the court that we defer that and use that money, you know, for these purposes. And unfortunately, they have not done that. And these contracts are in place, the services are being provided, and that they will not be funded if we don't do this. And I certainly share your frustration, Senator. Okay? The Speaker want that?
You know, I want to, you had rather given us this spreadsheet here that talks about the different fiscal years and what their encumbrances are and expenditures and what they're getting from the general fund and all that. And take, for example, even mental health. It's showing that what is authorized, at least the difference when you look at the general fund and the special funds, that there's a total of $2.8 million. Is not showing a shortfall, except when you look at the very bottom, 6 different departments and agencies that are listed here on this form that they would realize a shortfall. But in the letter that I had received from the governor, and it's in response to a letter that I had sent him, was that the departments and agencies that he listed that would really not will not have a shortfall are 6 totally different ones, and they're not even the ones where, you know, that are bracketed. I mean, so how do we rectify this? I mean, and these are numbers that are coming from DOA, and yet, you know, where, I don't know, I mean, I applaud you, though, in terms of responding to all of the individual requests, but then when we receive the numbers from them, their own forms, we're recognizing that there really aren't any shortfalls. So I don't know how you do this.
Yeah.
Can you?
Sure, I agree, Speaker Wampat. The shortfall identified for this, the chart that you have are for salaries. This shortfall at the Department of Mental Health is under contractual. So when the governor is saying he's going to shut down the government, we already, you know, think that he's not going to have money to pay employees. So from that perspective, there is more than enough money to pay employees. And if he really wanted to stay within the limits, he could transfer some of this excess here that you see over to the contractual side. But for whatever reason, and, you know, rather, if he doesn't execute it, then of course the contracts are not paid and we threaten the services to that. So we're just not getting the cooperation of the governor from that perspective. You know, it is frustrating. Other administrations have handled this kind of matters through the exercise of their transfer authority. But unfortunately, we're not seeing that kind of of response and management acumen, maybe, I don't know if it's acumen or just management desire to handle these things in those fashion. We are then adding this amount to the contractual line for mental health. So this chart is the, as you say, the salary lines, okay?
So, maybe then this chart needs to be published so that the government of Guam employees will know that this threat
Right.
of them being laid off is false, because this
Right.
is actually indicating that it's not. So
That's correct. According to the figures, there is more than ample spending authority, as the governor always says he needs, in order to meet the requirements of keeping the employees on the payroll and services flowing.
thank you very much.
Okay. Section 10 is the Department of Education Utility Cost Fund. And so this appropriates $400,000 to the Department of Education for additional power cost requirements. And this was identified as a need based upon the meeting of the Educational Financial Supervisory Commission that, as you know, goes through DOE's budget and expenditures, and they have identified that there's a shortfall in the utilities account. And so this bill gives them, and they're on a watch for that purpose. And so this, yes, that's why they're a C. So this will cure that C by providing them additional money for power.
But this will not be, would this address, though, the contract or the memorandum of understanding that they have with GPA for utilities?
No. The memorandum for the outstanding amount?
Yes,
No, but that was partially addressed in the SFSF bill with the creation of the fund, the trust fund. So the interest earned in that trust fund account will be applied towards the GPA note.
Right.
In Bill 103 that was recently signed into law.
Yeah. Okay. Section 11 is the fire department. And this is an additional appropriation increase from the current appropriation. Okay. So, and Mr. Badassi will explain this.
Okay. So in the governor's original bill, he asked for $3.9 million, the majority of which came in object classes 111 and 113. 113 being the retirement benefits portion. And because the Guam Fire Department and the Department of Administration both had large amounts of dollars in those two categories, we actually applied the 21.44 savings to the 113 category. And that's why you're seeing a decrease from the 3.9 million down to the 3.4 million for Guam Fire Department. So they are truly fully funded by the governor's request. We just took back the savings that are going to be realized in the next 4 months that the fire department doesn't need as a result of the original request, which was at 27.46% for the defined benefit unfunded liability.
So you're doing that as well for the others, not just the
Yes.
fire department?
Correct. Okay. And this is a funding shortfall from the current funding level, and that's why we've added this on top of that. Senator Palacios.
Is there any explanation as to why the Guam Fire Department is going to be short by $2.1 million when is there any problem somewhere there? This is for salary.
That's correct. I think what would happen, Senator Palacios, is that we funded a portion of the salaries from the Flame Fund, and the Flame Fund is not generating the amount needed to cover that appropriation, and so we have to find additional appropriation authority from other sources.
Okay.
The Flame Fund is the fire, life, and medical equipment. Yeah. And so, in addition, GFD was also supposed to receive some additional money from the ambulance fees.
Yes.
And that hasn't kicked in. So,
Okay.
once again, the
you,
revenue source
thank you,
is
Mr.
not
Chairman.
there to support that. Yeah. The next item is Section 12, and this is a appropriation of $883,000 When we appropriated in the current budget for the Department of Administration, we had de-appropriated amounts from their budget if they did not put in the convenience fee from the acceptance of electronic payments, the bank check fees, basically. And so we had anticipated that that would come in on December, and if they did not implement it by December, then the bank fee payments were taken out of their budget. And of course, they did not implement it to the December. When we did the supplemental or the additional appropriation in December, we appropriated some money back to DOA and extended the timeline to to March. Once again, March passed. They did issue the RFP, they awarded it, and there was a protest. So they haven't been able to add the convenience fee, and so the bank fees continue to be deducted from their appropriation for their staffing. And so this reimburses, once again, adds back those bank fees, costs that were deducted from their current budget to ensure that they have ample budget to carry them through the end of the fiscal year. And the bank fees for the rest of the fiscal year continue to be actually taken off the top instead of being added to the transaction and the bill that the person uses to when they pay through a credit card and so forth. So we needed to reimburse the Department of Administration's regular budget for the money that's been deducted. And it is in these areas of that additional appropriation. Section 13 is an appropriation to the Department of Public Works at the request of the governor. Once again, this amount is for $345,892, and based upon our communication with Public Works, 345 is for fuel for the buses. So there was an increase there because I guess the price of gasoline has increased, so the original appropriation, again, just like health insurance, we couldn't tell how much gasoline was going to go up, and it's gone up more than we actually had built in an increase, but it's increased more than the anticipated. So we're providing them that, and then they're requesting 132 for their object, for the salary category as well as a shortfall. And so once again, we're appropriating for that amount. The Department of Land Management also, there's an additional $71,000 that was not appropriated from their land survey revolving fund for their use, and so we are appropriating that and giving it to land management. And in addition to that, in the middle of this budget year, they've actually had their rent increased, even though the land management has consolidated some office space. The increase was almost 50% from what it was after the budget was passed. And so the additional amount of $240,000 is needed to cover that additional rent that was increased in the middle of this year. So that's the appropriation for land management. Section 15 is for public health and social services. Once again, $291,000 was requested by the department and the governor as additional money needed for their operations at the Department of Public Health and Social Services. Section 16 is a DICIT request of $166,947. Again, in the past, when these these amounts were short, the transfer authority with the governor was exercised and covered. Unfortunately, the governor, because he submitted these amounts, is basically telling us he's not going to use his transfer authority to make these, and he's requesting additional expenditure authority to meet these requirements. And we are giving him that additional one since he identified the funding source for them from these new funding sources. The Office of the Governor, this one was a little confusing to me because when the governor first took office, he said he was saving $1.3 million at the governor's office by reducing expenditures. That was, I think, the first press release he issued when he got inaugurated, that he understands the financial condition of the government and he's reducing and cutting expenditures of the governor's office by 1.3. Well, 5 months later, I guess he's saying, I want some of that savings back. And so he's requesting an additional appropriation of $650,000 for his office. And yes, Senator Rodriguez, did you want to delete this or?
No.
Oh.
I have a question though. You know, yeah, I've always wondered about that savings, but this, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it because the previous administration used funding that wasn't appropriated to pay for, I think it was leave?
That's correct. There was a lump sum distribution for the previous administration. But if you take that he said he's able to save 1.3 million and 600,000 was paid for lump sum, he still has a $650,000 balance of savings. I guess he just wants it back.
Sure, but you know, and this goes back to my question of, so the previous administration was able to do that, paying it without having the appropriate appropriations in place. They were allowed to do that?
No, yes, they're allowed to do that. They're allowed to, it's just like the health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If the governor had exercised what was appropriated, then we wouldn't run out of health insurance, but he's been fully paying the health insurance above the appropriation level.
Okay, thank you.
Speaker Wampat.
Maybe you can answer a question. Where would the funding then for Government House fall under? Would it be under the Office of Governor? Or is it listed separately for Government House? I mean, for the Government House.
It's part of the governor's executive budget.
But is it listed separately? Does it fall under the Office
Yes,
of the Governor?
yes, it's a separate.
It's a separate.
Yeah, it's a division. It's there's a separate appropriation identified for Government House.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, and the reason why I ask is I'm wondering whether could this be for part of the operations of Government House, because I remember there were several events that were that had taken place, and we were actually even called at one time to supplement, you know, the cost of hosting, you know, some dignitaries, because they said that the monies that were originally appropriated for Government House has been expended from you know, the last or the outgoing governor, and I'm wondering, could this then be part of that request? And the reason why I ask is because I know that you've put out a call to all the different departments and agencies who are listed here, and you wanted to really find out what the true cost is and what their shortfalls are. Did you get anything, a breakdown as to what this $650,000 is for the Office of the Governor?
Yeah.
Yes, we did. When we compare the Public Law 3196 as amended by 3224 against the object category information in the original Bill 184, 462,000 was for salaries, 189,000 for, or 187,000 for benefits. So it's basically for personnel.
Yeah, but he didn't tell us who. Yeah. He just put it in the personnel category. Any other questions? Okay. Section 18 is the appropriation to the Ancestral Lands Commission of $20,000. And this is salaries and benefits as well. So the next item is on section 19, BBMR. They're requesting an additional $59,754, and once again, these are for salaries and benefits. Senator Cruz. Yes.
What did you get word as to what this is for?
This from what we understand, this is to fund the deputy director at BBMR, and because BBMR in the past did not have a deputy director, and did not fill a deputy director position, and now they want to fill a deputy director position.
But I thought as part of the cost savings, there was a call out and there was great hoopla about the fact that they weren't filling many of the deputy director positions that they didn't feel were absolutely necessary.
Again, that's the disconnect between the press release and the reality. You know, they issue a press release saying they're not filling deputy, and then they send a bill down, and this was included in the governor's bill, that he wants this, and the identified position was for a deputy director.
When was the last time there was a paid deputy in?
I can't remember.
Was that far back?
Yeah, I can't remember. Senator Respicio?
You know, this is just one more area where I find troubling, Mr. Chairman. It seems like the administration is just doing things for the headline, and when the day is over and the sun rises the following morning, that whatever they said or did the day before doesn't matter. I mean, there is a huge disconnect between, you're right, between their press releases and what the media is reporting, also what the press releases are saying versus the reality, but there's also a disconnect between their own press releases. There's been a lot of inconsistencies over the last 6 months, and just not only this section, but the other section where the governor's asking to reimburse himself $650,000. Is that really why he's making 23,000 government of Guam employees and their families rally behind this budget? So far, what I'm seeing is that the Cabo Select Care contract is going to get paid because that's what the governor really wants. And number two, he's getting $650,000 when nowhere in the statutory scheme recognize the other struggles of the other branches of government, never mind the legislature, but the judiciary. Nothing in what the governor was trying to do recognized the challenges that are befalling on the other branch of government. So I don't know, Mr. Speaker, I don't, my motion is to delete section 19, and if the governor wants to have a deputy from BBMR, let him pay for it out of his office. Let him figure it out. That we don't even need, if we didn't do anything other than pay the balance of the health insurance contract, this government would not have collapsed. And I think that's the message I'm asking you to stay strong on, which you have been, despite the criticisms that from people that makes it look like all we are is obstinate and not wanting to cooperate. So my motion is to delete section 19, and the governor's got to have some kind of pain in this process, not just the frontline Government of Guam employees who have been threatened by being laid off. And again, the classified employees have nothing to worry about. And even if they went through this furlough process, Mr. Chairman, procedurally, they're not going to conclude this process in time before the fiscal year ends. So how does the governor continue to say this, and how does the media continue to let him get away with it? And so I believe if you are agreeing, Mr. Chairman, I believe my motion is in order.
Okay. There's a motion to delete section 19. I see Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, before we do that, I'm wondering if we can speak to the people and ask them why there's a need this time to have a deputy in place if indeed for many terms there hasn't been one in place. There's probably a reason, and I'd like to know that answer. And then, you know, the deputy issue, that too. I know there's at least two agencies I can think of that there are deputies for. One is Public Health, right? Mr. Castillo is still there.
Mm-hmm.
And one is Rev and Tax. Ms. Calvo is still there, right?
Yes.
Right? And so maybe, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm thinking there's reasons to this. So as the previous speaker has made the motion to delete section 19, I'm just asking that we hear from the people why.
Okay. There's a request to, I guess, ask the director of BBMR to respond to that question. Is there any objection to bringing the director in? All right, can the Sergeant at Arms just request Ms. Manglonia to come in? Okay. Right. Yes, that's correct. No, the director was requested. Thank you very much. We're back in session. Sergeant at Arms, did you swear? Thank you very much, and welcome, Ms. Manglonia. Ms. Manglonia, the discussion before the body right now is on Section 19, page 16 of the bill, and it's the appropriation to the Bureau of Budget and Management. The sum of $59,754 is hereby appropriated from the SAR fund to BBMR to supplement FY 2011 funding for general base operations. The communication we have been able to ascertain as to the purpose of this was for a deputy director position. And the question before the body was placed in a motion by Senator Respicio to delete this section, and Senator Yamashita requested that we hear from you as to the filling of the deputy and the purpose of this appropriation.
Yes, Senator. The request here is to supplement the existing budget of BBMR. It's not only for the deputy director, but the overall projected budget needs for payroll for BBMR. And the reason why we requested for the deputy director is, as you know, we had submitted the biannual budget, and we're going to go into a performance-based budgeting, and this is complicated, so we need the assistance of a deputy director.
Thank you very much. Senator Yamashita, are you satisfied with the explanation?
What I heard was that this would help meet personnel needs as well as bring in the expertise that the director determines she needs to help phase in performance-based budgeting.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay, Senator Respicio?
What's his experience in performance-based budgeting?
We're going to go into we're going to be doing the performance-based budgeting, and we need, the assistance of the deputy director.
That's why I'm
assist us with
asking, what's the experience in performance-based budgeting? He retired from there, and I have been waiting for performance-based budgets since I first came here 6 years ago.
And that's what we are, that's the reason, one of the reasons why we implemented, we submitted the biennial budget, because after the first year, then we're going to go into the training involved in doing the performance-based budgeting. The second year is when we're going to concentrate on that, or after the budget is passed. We will have the measurements in place.
Is there anybody down there that has experience in performance-based budgeting? Education or experience in performance-based budgeting?
I can't answer you.
This is your staff, right?
Well, I know that there was somebody that was trained before, but as far as technical knowledge, I don't know. I don't have that answer for you.
Would we not be better off using the $59,000 to hire someone with experience in performance-based budgeting, or in using that for training for?
Well, Senator, we do need the staff there. BBMR is understaffed. It's 70-some thousand. Oh, then you're short. Yes.
So this is not for other shortfalls, but just for that position shortfall?
No, it's the overall. We are projecting a shortfall for the department.
But if you didn't have a deputy, you wouldn't have a shortfall?
No. He just came in, if you look at when he came in.
For BBMR on the expenditure sheet,
Yes.
is there any reason why you spent 180 of your 271,000 for that department in 7 months? That would be 40 a month, and they were only budgeted 271, or probably about 24 a month. That's quite an over expenditure for the department that's supposed to be responsible for making sure that we don't overexpend.
Senator, I don't have my notes with me for that. I can come back with an answer, with a response to that question.
Again, my problem is I'm not asking you about the fire department. I'm not asking you about the judiciary. I am asking you about the department for which you were confirmed as the director. And you cannot tell me why, when you're budgeted $24,000 a month to run that office, you're spending at 40.
Like I said, I'd like to get my details on that, because that part of that expenditure is, there's a first quarter that was from the prior administration. So I don't have my notes with me here. I was just brought in to answer this particular question, and if I may be allowed, I'd like to respond to you.
I would too, because I'm concerned that you are the confirmed director and do not have a handle on the expenditures of your own department, which is the same question that I had about you about administration, and not having a handle on showing that it was 15 million over.
If I may be allowed, again, I would like to respond to that, given the time, so I get my notes and give you the detail of what that is.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Respicio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Maglonia, can you recall if the governor budgeted for a deputy director position for FY 2012? In his current budget submission before the legislature, does that budget for BBMR provide for a deputy director?
I'm sure.
You sure?
I mean, I don't
Because
have
if
the,
it doesn't,
should be.
then that means you're going to fund this position if this amendment.
It should be in there.
Do you think we can verify that very quickly, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Because
We'll look at that.
and in the meantime, while they're getting that information, you continue to make a lot of assumptions that that you will get a biennial budget, and that your response was that there will be a biennial budget, and you need the individual to be doing performance-based budgeting. So if we didn't have a biennial budget, we wouldn't need a deputy director position? Is that why that position has been vacant for about 6 years now? Because we have an annual budget as opposed to a biannual budget, which
well, that's just one of the reasons for bringing him on. But you know, the work at BBMR it is complicated, and we do need the staff.
So wouldn't you want to have a classified employee that would be there beyond the life of the appointing authority, and not just provide for another political appointee? Maybe, Mr. Chairman, you can go to another senator, but in the meantime, I'd like to know really if the governor's requesting that this position be budgeted in the
FY 2012.
Yeah,
We'll verify that. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Maglonia, I appreciate you coming in to be able to answer only one question. But I recognize that there are some concerns that have been brought up by the good senator from PD. And Mr. Chair, if I can, to allow the good lady to be able to provide the answers that are necessary, that I'm sure that this body is very much interested. Allow her some time to be able to go get her notes, be able to look at it and come back in and be able to provide those answers.
Sure.
I think that is very necessary to be able to come to some conclusion and a decision as to whether or not, you know, and it does fall within the realm of the amendment offered by the good senator. So I would like for her to have the opportunity to be able to have time to go get it.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead then and then proceed and come back to that. Again, the response was requested on the expenditure above the monthly. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead then and proceed with Section 20. Section 20 is the sum of $116,000. Once again, this is for the Department of Youth Affairs for additional general base operations at the request of the governor.
Mr. Chair, can you, because I know that you had requested information about every one of these additional appropriations, that as we go through, can you just tell us specifically like what these are so we would have an idea?
Some of them we did not get the details on, and I believe this may. Yeah, okay. This was for general base operations that fell into the areas of.
So in Bill, the original Bill 184, there was a lot of movement between object categories requested, and the basic net of all those changes was a positive 116,000. And you can see all the movement between object categories within the Department of Youth Affairs. So basically, it looks like they are increasing over time.
So this money would go towards overtime at DYA, according to the detailed budget that they had submitted to us. Okay? The chief medical examiner is section 21, 25,678. And this was salaries. I think they hired an assistant or an administrative aide at this agency or department. The section 22 is the supplemental annuity benefits and other costs. 321,303 is being requested. What happens is when we do the appropriation, we basically appropriate based upon a retiree number at a certain fixed time. And so what happens is sometimes you have a few more retirees come into play before the end of the fiscal year who are eligible for these. And so this kind of moves a little bit. In the past, once again, in the past, this has either been trued up at the end or transfer authorities used to cover this, but the governor's requesting, based upon the most recent report with the GovGuam Retirement Fund, that this additional amount is required. Senator Palacios.
Mr. Chairman, this one says for those who retired prior to 1995, so.
That's correct. There.
So that would already be a fixed amount.
This is out of the governor's bill in terms of this amount and this requirement and this request. So we're not changing anything from this end. They had indicated that, I guess based on their calculations, the original appropriation to cover all the retirees was short by 321,000.
Okay,
But supplement.
not
This is the
because-
4238.
But not because additional retirees are coming online, because in fact it should be lower, because as primary beneficiaries, like for
Passed
example
away.
myself passed away,
Yeah.
then only half would go to the survivors. I just want to point
Yes.
that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So it's not for new retirees, new eligible retirees. There are no new eligible retirees. Section 23 is retirees' Medicare premium. This is, as you know, when retirees are eligible for Medicare and they sign up for Medicare, they get a portion of their Social Security benefits reduced for the payment of the Medicare insurance benefit. And the government of Guam, in order to help in the health insurance part, actually pays for these employees to enroll in Medicare. And this is, as new employees enroll, once again, we have employees that become eligible during the fiscal year and then enroll, and their contributions or their payments to Medicare get reimbursed to them. So this moves because you have new applicants coming in and new eligible ones. And the amount being requested is for $285,000. Section 24 is for the pensions of the Magalahi and Segundo na Magalahi. 65,000 is being requested for the additional pension obligations of the governor and lieutenant governor positions. Previous governors, yes. Section 25 is for the retirement annuities for judges and justices, and the requested amount on this is $7,981. The utility bank cost account in Section 26 is appropriated an amount of $1.3 million for water and sewer accounts of the departments and agencies. Again, this is just based on the function of any rate increases or additional usage. So sometimes rather than get conservation, you get, consumption. And this requires and is being requested for an additional amount by the governor of $1.3 million.
Was this based on any type of on a formula of either previous or averages of previous bills, or an anticipation, normally a percentage above a certain amount? Only because let's say that if in fact then you know, a large amount of this, or half of it, let's say, is actually needed, then what happens in terms of this SRR fund and, you know, these monies, and can it be transferred? Does it stay in it, or does it go back to the language originally where it has to be appropriated if there are any lapses to any one of these funds? And it's not just for this specifically, but rather for the entire fund.
Madam Speaker, when we budgeted for water and sewer, and that's what this account is for, we actually took all of the bills for all the Gov Guam line agency water meters, water accounts, and we added those up, averaged the consumption, and then we actually built in an 8% increase to last year's consumption amount. And so we had increased that appropriation, but somehow, I guess through the governor is requesting and feels that he's going to be short this amount for water and sewer. And so we are, rather than risking, you know, the governor could just shut the water. And so this was requested by the governor, and we have allowed this appropriation for water and sewer connections.
So maybe my question, that might be covered somewhere either earlier or even later, is that this particular fund that this is all being deposited in or appropriated into this fund, that if there are then any lapses, is that then what happens to the lapses? Must it come back here then to be reappropriated, reprogrammed, or is that open totally then for the governor to just, you know, expend whatever it is beyond what all the individual items are listed for?
The way the budget was written and the administrative provision is that the money stays in the account. If the money is not used to pay for water and power, water and sewer, the money stays in the account. The governor is not allowed to transfer this out in the original budget, and this appropriation would be controlled by those original administrative provisions. Section 27. Section 27 is an initiative, and it's one of the new initiatives that we decided to fund for the governor. And this is $400,000 to the Department of Revenue and Tax for the implementation of electronic filing program. And we have begun discussions with the Department of Revenue and Tax as well as the IRS for the possibility of entering into a service agreement with the IRS to allow electronic filing of income tax returns for Guam residents. And so this money would be set aside and appropriated to the Department of Revenue and Tax to match any federal grant that we would get from the Department of Interior. We also had discussion with the Department of Interior, and they had indicated that they would are open to providing additional funding and technical assistance funding to implement and expand electronic filing, because there is electronic income tax filing available to Guam residents right now, but I think at this time it's limited to the 1040 EZ form. And so this would allow matching funds for technical assistance grants to expand the capability of filing tax returns to those beyond the 1040 EZ forms. Section 28. Section 28 is an appropriation to the Department of Public Works for the Agat and the Umatic and Marisu cemeteries. This was actually funded in Bill number 155, which the governor vetoed. $250,000 would go to Umatic, and it's for the reinforcement and stabilization. It doesn't expand the cemetery, but we have Senator Tony Ada was the one who brought this to the attention of committee, and we included it in 155. Since the governor vetoed that, we considered it for inclusion in this bill as well. And it's Senator Aileen.
Thank you, Speaker Ben. I have my question about this, and most certainly I respect what we're trying to do here. My question is, this property, that question has been answered, this property is government property or is church property? And then to that answer then, should the church, if it is this church property? Or is
No.
this government property? It is government?
Not to my knowledge. Senator Ada? It's Senator Cruz? I'm sorry.
The church only owns Pigo and Toksa.
Right.
That was Parks and Recreation up there.
So the question that the governor had, I don't even think they're using the Umatic Cemetery anymore. But what was happening is the erosion is washing out the current cemetery. And so we're going to stabilize that. We're not expanding it and so forth. On the Mariso Cemetery, the bottom portion of the cemetery in Maleso is owned by the Catholic Church. The top part where the crypts are is actually Department of Parks and Recreation property. And so, but they have a joint agreement to operate it because they're right next to each other. So the building of the additional crypts at Maleso will occur on the government of Guam side and not on the private church side. And so the governor's reference to, and it's amazing because the governor and I worked on the bill to fund the construction of the crypts at Maleso. He and I, we actually drove down to Maleso, met with Public Works, met with the mayor, and we funded the expansion of the Maleso Cemetery through a bill that he and I introduced. And so that's why it baffles me that now he's saying we can't give money to Maleso to expand it because we don't know who owns it, yet he and I worked on that project together and worked out all of the proper arrangement for the management of that cemetery, and everything worked fine. Now all of a sudden that they're running out of crypts and we need to expand it in the same place, in the same area, he's telling us there's a question on it. I really am baffled by that.
Thank you, Speaker Ben. And some people like myself really don't know that kind of history, but I do know that my thought is right now, and I understand the answer now, but the reason why I did raise it was in understanding that the Catholic Church probably has more money than the government of Guam.
Yeah.
My thought is, why are they not helping? But I heard the answer, so thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Senator Palacios?
A follow-up to that. So, since public funds is going to be expanded with this, it then means that any denomination may be eligible then for services on the public property side.
I believe so. I believe they do not limit it to just Catholic burials.
And of course,
Maleso.
fees paid into that for that service, that funds go to the, I think, to the Department of Parks and Recs.
There's an existing agreement between Parks and Rec and the Mariso Parish that resolves those issues.
Okay.
And those were worked out at the time. Governor Calvo and I, who was a senator, worked out the first expansion of the cemetery.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Okay. Section 28 is the additional 29 are the base operation appropriations requested by the governor for the following departments and agencies. And in this section of the bill, we actually showed you where the changes are from the current appropriation level. So the first, yes, okay, Mr. Badassi.
So this section only has 2 agencies in it, and the net effect of the movement of monies between the object categories was 0. So there's no appropriation increase in either of the next 2 sets of agencies, and you can see that up here on the screen.
Yeah, and so the appropriation level remains the same. The governor submitted it so that see, again, I hate to repeat this, but in prior administrations, when you move these object categories, the governor just exercised transfer authority and, moves it from benefits to salaries because he's not even affecting any other department and agency. But somehow, this governor sends a bill down to have us change it. and we'll accommodate him. I hope he does this for every department and agency. So, Senator Espicio?
Yeah, just when you think it'd be that simple, and it's what we've been arguing, Mr. Chairman, that he has the statutory wherewithal with the current budget law to make these kinds of things work. I don't ever recall any governor doing what this current governor is doing by rallying 23,000 employees and their families to say that the sky's falling when really we know what his motives are.
Yeah, and he's telling the public that he's going to shut down the police department if we don't pass this, but this doesn't even include additional money for the police department.
But
it
did
just
he
moves it from one object category to another.
But did he ever tell the public that he wants to hire a deputy director for BBMR?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the net effect of Section 29, and those are for GPD and the Department of Corrections. And Section 30, Section 30, oh, I'm sorry, Speaker, did you want a point of information?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I really think it's important because this is becoming, it's like we're in a ping pong, people are watching a ping pong game because every time we speak, whatever it is that we're questioning, immediately a press release is put out by the governor's office. And earlier there was this discussion about the total revenues and what the total expenditures are, and then only to say again is that we're playing, that the people are at the hands or the mercy of the senators, and this kind of press releases, it's just got to stop. It's ridiculous. And I'm asking as a point of information that, the sheet that was given to us by Chris that had handed out showing what the total revenues are and how it actually balanced in terms of what is being appropriated rather than something in the media saying, again, it's an unbalanced budget. So I beg you that please, if you have, take a few moments and just really clarify this to everybody. This sheet that we got showing the balance in terms of expenditures and total revenues and then expenditures.
Yes. All right. Yes. All right.
Okay. So
we'll respond to that request for clarification and information.
Okay. So based on earlier's questioning, we were looking at the governor's original Bill 184 and showing what was in his bill, and I was kind of referring back and forth between what's funded and what's not in the substitute version of Bill 184. There was some confusion between whether or not the numbers balanced out. It really, the presentation of that information was not meant to be a balancing tool, so to speak. And so immediately upon Senator Cruz's question of the numbers, we printed out a sheet that shows all the expenditures in this current budget and all the revenue sources, and they balance, with the exception of the $71,000 that's being appropriated from the Land Survey Revolving Fund, which is from this year's current revenues. And so there is a balance of revenues and expenditures within the budget.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Speaker. Anything else? Senator Palacios?
Chairman, at least for the benefit of the Director of Correction out there, we're not finished with Section 29B.
Yes.
That's the Department of Corrections.
That's correct. That is the Department of Corrections.
Yes, but there was no explanation. We didn't go through that.
Okay. Again, this is a request of the governor, which again just allows him to move the appropriation from Senator.
So you can see up on the screen, again, this was a zero effect. It's not an increase in appropriation. Basically, the agency is moving appropriations from salaries and benefits to overtime.
So that would transfer the appropriation. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Section 30 of the bill is there is a outstanding amended permanent injunction order by the court, and so We had additional money after covering the requests for the appropriations by the governor of $763,849. And since we know that at some point, unless the governor petitions the court and he's successful in getting a reduction in the court-ordered payments for the next couple of months, he's going to have to find an appropriation to pay for that. And so we are providing him an additional $763,000 to meet that purpose towards the payment required of $3.7 million. The governor actually said it wasn't necessary, or he's going to figure it out, but since we had additional appropriation, we decided to fund that requirement. Chapter 3 is what we...
One moment.
Yes, Speaker?
Was this a request from the governor's office then to pay the $3.7 million agreed, an agreement between the courts for the permanent injunction?
No, the governor did not request for this, but we know that it's something that he has to deal with, and so we're providing him some relief, because we've asked him to petition the court to defer these orders based upon the fact that the federal management team still has $5 million in the bank, and that they're really not going to need this additional 3.7 in the next 4 months. But that is a court order to pay 3.7. And so if he's not successful in that, we're at least providing him $740,000 towards any payment that may be required.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question before we move on to the next chapter, as we are identifying what needs to be taken care of. One thing I didn't see here in either bills is the shortfalls that we have with the Guam Election Commission. There's about a $250,000 amount that is owed to vendors, for their attorney and also for the people that provide the softwares. And I want to bring it up because in discussions with them, we're having an election next year, and if we don't address this, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, but since we're talking about the shortfalls, this is something that I would like to address and see how we can do that.
As just indicated, we have balanced the expenditures and the revenues in this budget, and if we want to address that, we would need to reduce an appropriation to an existing line item in this budget.
Yeah, sure. And so, I realize that, but I just want to state this for the record, because it's appearing that we're, at least for the lay people out there, it's appearing that we're addressing a shortfall that that the administration is saying that we need to address, because we're going to shut government down if we don't. But there's other things out there still pending, even and not being addressed in these bills. And so that's something I want to bring up. I understand that that's something we have to do, and I know, I'm not ready to do that in offsetting it with removing something here. But I just want to state that for the record.
Understood. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if you can allow, before we go, like as the good Senator Rodriguez said, before we go to the next chapter, Section 30, actually the language here that it says, unless otherwise ordered or allowed by the district court.
That's correct.
I'm a little bit concerned with the language "or allowed." Or what are we inferring, or why are we using that language?
Because there was a, for example, earlier this year, the court did not order a reduction in the payment, but it allowed the governor to defer it. So it didn't order that your payment is reduced, but it allowed the governor to defer the first payment from February to March. So there may be some other fashion. I guess you could take out "or allowed," and everything that is related to this will be subject to a court order. That was the only reason why we included the word allowed, but I don't think it would be detrimental to this to remove the word allowed and just say unless.
I don't see that it be detrimental. I just need to understand the reasoning as to why we're using that. Secondly, with regards to the 763,849, and recognizing, as you said, the governor did not request for this, but we're going to go ahead and provide him this funding to be able to do this. And then you have lines 18, 19, and 20. I guess it's a schedule of when the deposits are supposed to be made and the amounts, the total amount that should be made to.
That's correct.
Which case is this, first off, Mr. Chair?
This is the amended permanent injunction with the Department of Mental Health. And this is, the current court order sets this payment schedule.
So am I to...
And it was, what date? April 18th was the latest order by the court, and on April 18th, they ordered the government of Guam to pay $500,000 by July 1st and $3.2 million. Is it July? Oh yeah, that's right. They just paid $2 million. So this is the remaining balance of that April 18th order. June 1, $2 million. July 1, $500,000. August, 3.2. That's the current standing order by the court. And what we have asked the governor and the attorney general is file a petition for the court to push that back, because they have $5 million in the bank now, and to give him an additional 3.7 by the end of this fiscal year is not going to move anything further along, because they have more than enough in that $5 million to ramp up their operations. And then there's additional requirements in the new fiscal year. It gets folded into the regular Department of Mental Health budget for some of these expenditures.
And I agree with you there. That's why I'm a little bit concerned as to if we're going to ask for a deferment or we're going to ask to push it, because there is $5 million in that account. And then we have $763,000 that we're going to, is it necessary? I guess my whole point here.
Right. If they're not successful, then we're going to have, the governor will be challenged to find this 3.7 in the next 2.5, 3 months.
Well, is it going to be the standing rule with regards to Committee on the Rules to go back, or Committee on the whole to go back to some of these sections? I want to do a little bit more research on this thing to see whether, like the good senator from Pt.2 was concerned about, there may be some other obligations, and maybe we can address that with some of these things here.
Senator Cruz, did you ever?
Just to follow up on the two of them, I mean, if we are going to open it up, I think there is something, I mean, I just want to put on the record, I am concerned about the fact that we're not providing funds for the teaching facility to have an alternate educational facility for our students. I want to state that on the record. If we don't have a chance to go back to it today, that's fine. I just want to say, if we're going to be addressing needs of the government, that to me is a more dire need than the 14 million being requested that would be needed in September. We're going to need a facility very, very soon, because though today's the last commencement, classes start in 10 weeks.
Again, we've balanced this budget. Doing things to unbalance it now without the offsetting would really open everything else up, and so I just want to caution the body on that and request your cooperation. Okay? Senator Blas? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We're now in Chapter 3. This is what we call the enhanced spending authorization of existing appropriations. And the governor required, or the governor identified during the public hearing, through his executive order, approximate savings of about 4-point-some million dollars prospectively between now and the end of the fiscal year. And so this section 2, would allow the governor to take those savings that he realizes from this plan that he, or the presentation that he made, and allow him to transfer those savings to other shortfalls that may occur beyond what he has identified here. So if something should happen, between now and the end of the year, and he is able to realize the savings that he had presented to the body of approximately 4.4 million, that he has transfer authority over those savings. In addition, and that he's required to report those. The governor also requested that the transfer authority on general fund and special funds be lifted. The governor currently has 15% transfer authority over the general fund appropriation, and he's requesting that he be allowed 100% transfer authority over any appropriation at all, which basically says no budget, just lump sum and let me take it and put it wherever I want. And the committee feels that that would be imprudent and irresponsible on the part of this body to allow him to just take anything from anywhere and put it at any place. And so we're keeping the transfer authority limitation because he really doesn't need it so much anymore, because he's already even identified the changes in those object categories for the departments and agencies that he sent down. But he still gets this 15%. Now in the special funds, we allowed him to transfer only 15% of object categories. And we feel that, all right, we'll work with you on this, and we'll allow you 15% of the agency appropriations of the special funds. So he has the same flexibility on transfer from general fund and special fund, which gives him additional authority to transfer among and between agencies that are funded by special funds. And so that does give him additional flexibility on that transfer authority, but it doesn't give him 100%, basically, which says you don't need a budget. And so that is the effect of this section, and then it requires reporting for this. Section 4 of this section.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Senator Blas.
Before we move on to section 3, can I just get a little time just to read this, to see this again?
Sure.
Okay. So, can I ask for just a 1-minute recess?
All right. We'll be in a 1-minute recess. Okay, Senator, are we okay? I think we can, yeah. Okay, Senator Blas, we're ready to go back in? Committee of the Whole is back in session. Senator Blas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know, Mr. Chair, again, thank you for to allow the recess so that we can have some discussion on actually where I believe that what is set out in page 22, section 8, and going back to page 11, line 17, subsection 221004, administration of SAR fund, and specifically line 28.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Speaker, recognizing and as far as the bill itself sets out the parameters and where the money should be going within those objects and those items, okay, covered by this act itself. And I'd like to be able to give the governor the flexibility within this act to have some transfer authority within the categories and the objects that are in this act, not outside of this act, in this act. Allow him the flexibility, as we do with the regular budget. Give him that flexibility here. So I don't have the language prepared right now, but I would like the language that is contained currently is that the governor shall not have any transfer authority within this. And I would like to provide him that flexibility of be consistent with also the current budget law that we have to have him at least 15% transfer authority.
Okay, so the amendment would be on page 11 in line 28 through 31, that we would remove the restriction on no transfer authority and allow the 15% transfer authority flexibility to the governor in this act, in the revenues identified in this act, the same as he does in the special funds.
Yes, sir.
All right. And we'll have the legal counsel work up the appropriate verbiage on that. Is there any, Senator Cruz?
My only concern, Mr. Chairman, is, as I understand it, one of the complaints that we've been hearing about is that the transfer authority was used to take money from different accounts, and we're now having to pay it back, and that's causing some of the major shortfall. Are we not perpetuating that bad practice by allowing this? Or is it that we have that much faith that they won't utilize it the same way the last one did?
Well, I think, I hate to say this, but in those transfers, they may have done that beyond the authority that they had, and we've asked for a legal opinion on that. And here we are restricting the transfer to 15%. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Senator Blas, this is codified, so for the next 4 months, that transfer authority for this would be, so would add it as a miscellaneous provision in the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, rather than doing it under section
Thank you,
page
sir.
11? Okay. So any objections to that? No objections? That amendment passes then. We are now then on section 4 of the page 23. Again, this is the enhanced spending authorization. This allows then the governor, as you recall, the identified $4.4 million in savings. This would allow the governor then to transfer any of the savings realized to meet the amended permanent injunction requirement should the court proceed with and not allow the governor to waive or defer any of the payment, that he can use those savings when he realizes them from the executive order identified to go towards the amended permanent injunction. So it just identifies and makes that available to him. Chapter 4 of the bill are the prior year obligation requests. The Guam Police Department has, and these are basically consistent with the governor's request in the original bill. 338,000 is then appropriated for prior year overtime incurred and owed to the police officers prior to fiscal year 2011. The Department of Corrections, once again, this is consistent with the governor's request of 1.685835 to the Department of Corrections for the prior year overtime. Again, these are covered by the revenue sources identified and will be coming out of the SAR. Section 4 is an appropriation for Guam Memorial Hospital. Apparently, some departments and agencies owe the government of Guam Memorial Hospital. Right. And so this allows the authorization for payment of prior year obligations to Guam Memorial Hospital. This was requested by the governor. It's not an appropriation, but it authorizes him to make payments to the hospital. Section 5 is, again, a request for additional flexibility by the administration to allow them to pay for prior year overtime obligations, once again, using the base operation budgets of the Guam Police Department. So it allows him basically to transfer from object categories for additional overtime that may be incurred, that has been incurred by the Department of Public Safety and Department of Corrections and the Guam Police Department. And it also authorizes them to make those prior year obligations from the current budget of 30-196. Chapter 5, miscellaneous provisions. This is the health benefits cost account. This is where we pay our health insurance requirements. And we're amending the reporting requirements. We're asking that the insurance carriers greater detail on the reports of the enrollees and the costs. Right now, the data doesn't break out by department or agency. They give us gross numbers, so we're requiring them that when they report enrollment, they report it by autonomous agency, retirement fund, and the different agencies, so we can actually look at the utilization of the different departments and agencies. So these are, again, just clarifications and additional stratification of the enrollment under the government of Guam and the reports. And Section 2 is would delete the income tax refund compensation plan, and this was, Chris, this is the revenue. Yeah, in Public Law 30-196, we allowed a bonus plan for the Department of Revenue and Taxation to process income tax refunds. And we have deleted the bonus compensation that was passed in 30-96, and what we're now allowing them is to actually use that money to pay for overtime. The governor's proposed that we borrow money for the payment of income tax refunds, but unless we process those refunds, we're not going to know how much money we need to borrow. And so this allows them to use the money that was supposed to be for bonus for overtime to process 2009 and 2010 refunds, so that when we go to borrow, we know exactly how much we need. And this would allow them that flexibility. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back, but I want to request if we can take a minute recess. I wanted to just clarify something offline.
Okay. There's a request for a minute recess. We'll be in recess. Committee of the Whole is back in session. We're on Section 4, which is the conditional appropriation of supplemental appropriations reserve fund. And this section would require that funds appropriated from the SAR fund contained in this chapter are conditioned and shall be effective upon certification, Department of Administration, that the deposits to the income tax refund accounts are in compliance with the law, and that if they're not in compliance with the law, then there's a report required as to why they're not, and a plan to make them comply or to bring them into compliance. So again, it's just the reporting requirements so that we know what they're doing with regards to deposits into the fund and whether or not they're meeting the targeted deposits into those funds. Section 5 is an addition to monthly reports by the tax commissioner and the director of administration regarding, again, these total deposits into the income tax efficiency account, and then the auditor to review whether or not the deposit plan, these are the provisions that we set aside. Department of Administration does a full year budget and say, this month we're going to put these amounts in. And so they're just now required to detail those reports to us. And then the public auditor would be required to just audit and say whether or not those deposits are made and so forth. So it's a compliance of the, towards that. Section 6 is accounting recognition of FY 2009 ARA Make Work Pay tax credit for fiscal year 2010 and 2011. Again, this affects really the income tax refunds and how much money we owe, and the reporting of those revenues. We received some cash up front for the Make Work Pay credit to pay these credits to the taxpayers. And so what we're requiring Rev and Tax is setting a deadline to process those refunds and then account for those credits and book them in the appropriate fiscal year so that they are reflected in the revenue and the expenditures of the government of Guam of those tax credits. So it's not any increase or anything, it's just reporting and accounting and processing of those credits. Section 7 is the recognition for 2010 ARA Make Work Pay in fiscal year 2011. And again, BBMR and DOA will then take the report filed by Rev and Tax after processing those accounts and then book those in the revenue statements of the government of Guam for the appropriate fiscal year. Section 8 was a provision that was included in Bill 156, which was withdrawn from this body. And this is an authorization for the long-term lease of Ukudu. Speaker Wampat? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the fact that, I realize you had pulled Bill 156 back, and that, we were concerned that already they were going to start, hopefully this summer, in terms of building the expansion for Okudu High School to take on an additional 800 more students. And there's a realization here really of a savings for the government of Guam, because the qualified school zone bond here would be able to reimburse the government for the interest, and that in essence the only interest that the government I think would be paying for would be like between 1.5%. Right. So that's definitely a very big savings for the government for the life of this lease. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank you very much, Speaker Wampat. So that is Section 8 of the bill, which takes us then to Chapter 6. This is a chapter that adds then the what we call the Deficit Reduction and Compassion for People First Act. As you know, the body had considered the implementation of the Public Law 30-145, which required the Guam Waterworks Authority to reimburse the general fund from the next borrowing for $27 million. And the Public Utilities Commission finally issued its order to Guam Waterworks Authority that says that you are required to implement the Public Law 30-145, and you will make then a payment to the retirement fund of $18.888 million. And in addition to that, you will investigate the rate structure of GWA to determine whether or not any rate increase is actually required. We were able to prove to the administrative law judge that there is enough flexibility in the current rate structure that they can reimburse the general fund and not raise rates. And the administrative law judge has been ordered by PUC to investigate that. And so the reimbursed amount then to the general fund would be divided into two appropriation categories. One of them is for income tax refunds for 2009 and prior, and emergency refunds. 50% of the reimbursed amount would go to that. This is all part of our deficit. And then the other half of the money will be used to pay for the COLA retiree pursuant to the Rios case that was ordered by the Superior Court of Guam. We have approximately $18 million outstanding, and this would allow us to pay half of the outstanding amount of that COLA settlement case, bringing us closer to finally resolving that long-standing matter. And so that would be this chapter, and that would end the bill as substituted by the committee. Senator Blas?
Hey, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if you can allow me, actually went back to page 17.
Okay.
Section 27, Guam Income Tax Return Processing Policy Initiative. Although I do agree with regards to the utilization of the funding to be able to enhance the capability of revenue and tax for electronic filing program, I am concerned. Actually, it's actually in page 18, line 22, part of the language for the funding, where basically it states the department that the revenue tax will get matching funds from the Department of Interior towards the integration of e-filing and processing of all Guam income tax returns in an IRS service center only. Can you explain the necessity of the only?
Yes. We looked at the options available to Department of Revenue and Tax and the experience we've had in the past. And we find that when we enter into that, the IRS has a huge amount of technical assistance, technical grants, and constantly update their software in order to accept e-filing for the changes in the tax code. And so we felt that if we were to enter into a service agreement with that, we would have the benefit of all of those enhancements in their system, and that would translate into additional capabilities for the local government. So this amount would be coupled with the Department of Interior technical assistance grants. If there was a technical assistance grant or other revenue that was needed to do independent programming functions, then this money would not be available for that purpose, and it may be funded in some other initiative. But we, the committee felt that based on the conversations with DOI, Revenue Tax, that this would be should be the initial assessment and review as the best way of proceeding with enhancing e-filing here. That gives us the additional capabilities of the IRS programs rather than going independent. We are spending millions and millions of dollars when we develop our own code and our own sources outside of what we would you could call off-the-shelf programs and computer software systems. So we wanted to make that initiative first, and if that's determined to be not feasible, then we can find some other avenue to fund an initiative outside of the service center. But we wanted to dedicate this money for that purpose.
So along those lines, Mr. Chair, and you says that to go out and look, and I agree. Let's go first there. Let's start to do the studies and let's go first there. But if in the studies, okay, we find that there are actually more viable alternatives,
then we would come back and fund that alternative. Right. First step, we assess, and we've discussed this, and this may be the best, but if for some reason we decided not to pursue it, then we go in a different direction, and we would then need to find other funding, or we may redirect this funding for that purpose.
Then that would have to cause maybe undue delay, because with the utilization of that word only, it actually restricts that. Even if you were to find a viable option to this, that can be considered, because the only thing that you can use is that IRS service center.
That's correct. At this time, under this, I tell you, the request by the governor was just an appropriation of $400,000 for electronic filing program. Not even what kind. He didn't even tell us income tax, GRT, real estate tax, business license. All he wanted was a $400,000 for that purpose. Now, we know in the testimony that was given to us that they wanted it for income tax. And so we've restricted the expenditure of this money to work towards that first, couple it with any technical assistance grants. And so if they come back and change it, then we can change that. But it certainly, we don't, I know the governor just sent out a press release on this very subject matter saying, oh my God, you're tying it up. It's just incredible. It really is, again, the governor wanted it for electronic filing program. For what? Nothing. And so, based upon the public hearing and what Reverend Tax said they wanted to pursue, which was income tax refunds, and that we've begun discussion, we can couple this money and begin an assessment of that and see if we want to go in that direction. So I just think that it's a prudent way of approaching this thing. We can change it, and it allows us that flexibility, and it gives us some accountability for what they would be able to spend the money for. Senator Cruz?
Just a point of information, Mr. Chairman, so that it's clarified on that one issue. Would I be allowed to read from the original bill from the governor?
Yes.
Section 15, appropriation to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for e-filing. The sum of $400,000 is appropriated from the general fund to the Department of Revenue and Taxation for the implementation of the electronic filing program. The unexpended balance of the appropriation made under this section shall not revert to the general fund and shall be available until fully expended for the original purpose of said appropriation. That was all that he sent over.
Right.
I just wanted to make that clear to underscore your statement.
Right. Thank you.
And I see your concern here, Mr. Chair. And okay, just don't worry. I wasn't hit in the back to say this because they were going to come out with that. I'm just as surprised as that.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there was some discussion I had previously. I just said I couldn't bring that up until after everything is done here. My concern is the only, and opening up the options to that. And I recognize maybe the use of only can be used. If we're looking at income tax returns as opposed to any other type of returns, is that the concern that we had here?
Yeah. I'm saying that there, again, remember I said when we discussed this that they do have the capability. So this allows them to expand that. Because their current capability is to accept 1040 EZ. And in order to expand that, they need additional programming capabilities.
Okay.
And we, in our conversations with Department of Revenue Tax, Department of Interior, and the IRS, to explore the idea of a service bureau, which would give all of these other amenities that the IRS has that assist in greater analytics available through IRS system, enhance the capabilities of these departments. And so we believe that this may be a more prudent approach and would like to use it. And right now, the current 1040 EZ utilization is about 5%. And so when we use the IRS, it allows greater, and I think faster implementation of e-filing, because they have most of the computer system programming already done, or else they're able to access their consultants for the development of the software. And so we would like to work towards that direction first. And we actually developed a position paper on this, and we can forward that to you, which allows for the exploration of this service bureau relationship.
And I appreciate that. Again, well, I guess it's just the way you read this. Is it for Guam income tax returns only or IRS Service Center only? You see what I'm getting at? Which one is it?
It's to work towards the...
More towards the IRS Service Center?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
all right. Thank you very much, Senator Blas. So, again, we're back to the last chapter of the bill, and that, again, that was the order's done. It's there. The money will be remitted if GWA follows the order, and this just sets up the appropriation of when that payment is made, what it goes for, and it goes for emergency refunds and the COLA settlement amount. So that brings us to the end of the bill.
Only one then, just to...
Speaker?
Then you're saying that the outstanding is $18 million right
On the
now
COLA,
for the
correct.
COLA. And then this will realize like $9 million. And
Right.
then on this sheet that you have here that the governor has submitted, it will be another additional $1 million.
1 million, correct.
So, okay, so that
So
would be
it'll-
like a total of 10.
The total would be 10 available
Oh, well, we're
towards
really
that.
getting- Okay, so very
that
close
obligation.
then. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So that concludes the discussion on Bill 184. Any other comments on the bill? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The governor's submittal for the Bureau of Budget and Management for fiscal year 2012 did include a deputy director as part of the staffing pattern. So it's a funded position in FY 2012. That's right. So we tabled the motion pending the question that was asked with regards to whether or not it was funded in FY 2012. So if we find Senator Respicia, we can then inform him of that and see if he wants to continue with the motion. And so we'll need to dispose of that motion. Senator Guthertz, while we're waiting for...
Yes, while we're waiting, Mr. Speaker, just a comment on the deputy director matter, not just specific to BBMR, but, you know, I'm working on legislation, I think some of you know this, that would set criteria down for a deputy director, for a department or agency to have a deputy director. And originally my plan was not to have deputy directors as a cost-saving measure, and to encourage the use of the most senior classified employee in a department or agency to serve in that capacity, so that we would have continuity in departments and agencies from the career service, the classified service. So no matter who the director is, there's always someone there that knows the agency, the operations, the history, the processes, etc. And I thought if that wasn't acceptable, then I would propose that we establish criteria that a department or agency can only have a deputy director if they have a minimum of, let's say, 50 classified employees. And of course, this is both a cost-saving measure and a measure to encourage the recognition of the classified service in this government. I think it's very appropriate for any governor to have a policy director in a department or agency. But I'm not so sure we need deputy directors in general at this point in time in the history and development of our government. And I'm also not certain that we should allow deputy directors if departments are very small and if the workload doesn't justify it. So I just want to alert my colleagues that I am working on that kind of legislation and sort of thinking in the future for this government that we need to find ways to maximize the resources we have and frankly to give recognition to the classified service. This approach is done in the federal government routinely, where they have the senior executive service, they have very competent classified technocratic individuals that serve in this capacity and are very able to assist an appointed director of the president or appointed secretary of the president. So I just want to alert my colleagues that this is something I'm looking at. I don't know if we want to sort of consider this for the 212 budget, but this would certainly generate a lot of savings for this government and also give proper respect to the career service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Michelle, did you?
Thank you, Speaker Ben. As the previous speaker indicates, there's great room for improvement in what exactly our employees should know and be able to do, how we evaluate that, how we provide training for that, and how we continue to help them improve in realizing a mission. And then as we go through the whole bill process, I think all of those conversations will be had. But Speaker Ben, in the meanwhile, I really do think, and as we get there, I really do think that it's important that we allow current management to decide how they're going to manage at this point. And indeed, if they decide that they want certain agencies to have deputies and they're going to spend the money like that, and it's going through a process right now, right? But for the record, I just think, you know, we allow people to do their jobs, and if that's how they're going to, and certainly in months to come, it's so where's the performance-based management? So where are these indicators? What have you done? And we go through that. But I just think, as I've run a big agency, I appreciated the ability to choose who my team was. Thank you, Speaker Ben.
Thank you very much. Senator Respicio, on your motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to reiterate my motion to delete Section 19 and restate my resolve for the body to do something like this. You know, I appreciate the comments made by both retiring speakers, but as I try to sort through the infomercials and the press releases, Mr. Chairman, regarding the whole supplemental budget, I've said, you've said, others have said, what's really clear is that the governor needs a spending authority to continue the health insurance contract. We've learned that he also will have $650,000 to spend out of his budget. And we also learned that he's requesting $60,000 in Section 19 to fill another political appointed position. Now, who's really benefiting from this budget that we've been entertaining all afternoon? I say the governor's office will stand to benefit from this budget package rather than the people of Guam, because all they've been put through is just fear. Just fear, Mr. Chairman, and now the latest press release is the governor's office arguing for 100% transfer authority, and this body just reaffirmed the need for a 15% transfer authority. If you recall, when we were in the legislature, you know, it was Governor Calvo, who was a senator, who did not want to give Governor Camacho any transfer authority at all. And I went on record saying that I want to be part of a body that gives the governor the tools necessary to govern and to run the government of Guam as he needs to run this government. And so we, over his objections, Mr. Speaker, the current budget has a 15% transfer authority provision, to which this current governor, when he was a member of this legislature, did not support. And the Vice Speaker just nudged me and said, remember that? And so I'm sure he'll also be speaking to that effect. And so when you look at Section 19, and you heard from the BBMR director say that that position is about $70,000, but they want to use it to cover other shortfalls, if the amount is $59,000, that just tells me that money is for that one position and nothing else. And so I think if the governor really wants to show that he's demonstrating some sacrifices, that he's made some sacrifices, just as this branch of government has, just as the judiciary has, Mr. Chairman, then I hope that there'll be no objections to my amendment. And let's send a message that we have found collectively a way to save $60,000, and maybe that's the new direction that we need to start on. Because over the last 6 months Governor Calvo's been governor of Guam, it just seems like we're staying the course. And it just seems that it's business as usual, and how much more time? You want to give him 4 more months? The BBMR director could not even confirm if the governor's requesting that this position be budgeted for the next fiscal year. So if they don't have that information readily available, then I say you snooze, you lose. And so again, I appeal to the governor to stop making our people fear that their health insurance will be terminated, that their jobs will be lost, that this government will shut down. Everything that we've talked about this afternoon is nothing further from that, and we would have never taken our community down that road. And so I hope that there'll be no objections to my amendment. And if members feel very strongly that the governor needs a BBMR deputy director, then he can use his transfer authority and figure it out. Yeah. But my message to him was, couldn't he better instead use that money to have a classified employee hired, and so that that position will be there beyond the life of the current appointing authority?
Yeah, I want to clarify for the record. We did confirm that in the FY 2000 budget there is a deputy director position budgeted, and it's funded at $86,000.
But what's the current salary of the BBMR deputy director?
There is none. There's none because there's no deputy.
Okay, but what's the current salary of the director position, BBMR?
I think it's right around 86 also.
And so they want to fund the deputy at the same level as the director?
I believe so. Or is it
79?
We did pass it out, I think. So
it's 88 for the director and 80 for the
okay, there we go.
No, sorry, 80 for the deputy.
80 for the deputy. I'm sorry. Yeah. There was an objection to
I recall when these positions were $60,000. And
I recall when they were 48. That's how old.
So it's I'm hearing that there would be an objection to my amendment, and let the record really show who's trying to save the government money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There's a motion on the floor to delete section 19. There's been an objection to the motion. I will call for the vote. All in favor of the motion to delete section 19, raise your hand. Six. Motion fails. Yeah. Okay. All right. There being any other discussion on the bill? If not, would like to then conclude the discussion on the bill and rise from the committee of the whole. Can I ask the majority leader to make the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of the discussions in the Committee of the Whole surrounding the substitute bill number 184-31, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, I move that we rise from the Committee of the Whole and to have all the amendments that were made be intact. One amendment, that's right. But at this time, I want to take the opportunity to recognize you and your staff, as well as the OFB director and his staff, your staffs, for really wanting to work with the administration in presenting a budget, a substituted version, which took the governor's Bill 184 and found the necessary cash, real cash, that's going to be backed up in order to do the things that he needs. And so at this time, I move that we rise from the Committee of the Whole And I thank you, and I thank our body for this bipartisan and collegial support.
On that motion, no objections? Committee of the Whole will rise. We'll recess for just a short time while the Speaker takes the podium. I'm sorry. Thank you very much to all of you.
The legislature is back in session, and we have risen from the Committee of the Whole, and I recognize Speaker Ben on Bill
Thank you,
184.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, having concluded discussion from the Committee of the Whole and the Committee on the Whole rises, the committee is here to report back to the body that we have risen from the matter of the discussion on Bill 184-31 with the motion then to place Bill number 184-31 as amended on the third reading file, and that we vote on the bill without engrossment. There was only one amendment that was made.
On that motion without any objections, so ordered. Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules and while we prepare to go into the voting file, can I just make a motion that we revert back to motions, and so I can present something for the body to dispose of, and that's the matter of the confirmation surrounding Frank Roberto. So I move that we go back to motions notwithstanding the House rules.
Without any objections, so ordered. Senator Respicio, you're
Thank you, Madam
recognized.
Speaker. As we are all aware, the governor, at the same time, he appointed Mr. Frank Roberto to be the director of the Agency for Human Resource Development. He also issued an executive order that separated the two agencies, AHRD from the Department of Labor, which caused a lot of angst among the Department of Labor employees because they read the executive order, and the executive order said that the AHRD shall be independent from the Department of Labor, and that caused the Department of Labor employees who are getting their salaries from that Workforce Investment Act grant to wonder what would happen to their positions if those two agencies were separated. And so the other week, we had a public hearing here at the legislature to hear the confirmation. I just decided to move forward anyway and to give the administration the opportunity to really demonstrate to the legislature that that separation will not result in an additional budgetary need to either agency, namely the Department of Labor. And so at that confirmation hearing, Madam Speaker, there was a commitment that the administration will present to my committee a memorandum of understanding that will point out that the two agencies, although they're separated, they have to work together, they have to have shared resources, and that executive order will not do anything to exacerbate the current cash crisis facing the government of Guam. I've been waiting for that memorandum of understanding, and now I'm being presented with an option by the administration that the MOU was signed by the AHRD nominee, but is yet to be signed by the Director of Labor. To demonstrate our wanting to be accommodating, we even said, well, then have the acting Director of Labor sign the MOU, or get the Director of Labor who's off island, get her to e-sign or do something to say that they support. The issue is not with the HRD, Madam Speaker, but the issue is what this separation would do to impact the Department of Labor. So you have an MOU where AHRD has signed, but the Department of Labor is yet to sign, and I'm not sure we want to move forward on a MOU that's not signed by both parties, and the consequence of not moving forward would mean that the nominees will expire before we're able to have session again. And so if you'd like to take a minute recess, or if there's the will of the body to go ahead and confirm him anyway. And I just wonder, I saw the Director of Labor the other night. She was on island. I think Monday night. I don't know if she probably left Tuesday morning, but the point is the administration had ample time to put in writing that the separation between the two agencies was going to be fiscally neutral. And at a time when we just were chastised by the administration for trying to corral us to come in here and address this supplemental budget, where we're getting a lot of emails from all these GovGuam employees and their families, I don't feel comfortable moving forward on the nominee without any assurances from this MOU as the instrument that the separation of both agencies is fiscally neutral. And so I leave that to the better judgment of the collective body.
So is there a motion then? Recess? Okay, take a brief recess. Legislature is back in session. Senator Respicio,
Thank you,
you're
Madam.
recognized.
Madam Speaker, just to conclude, as chairman who has oversight over both AHAD and labor, I would take the full responsibility to say that I'm not comfortable having my committee move forward to report his confirmation out for the body to dispose of without that MOU to which it was the administration's idea, to which it was their commitment to prove that the separation would not result in additional costs. And so the net consequence, I'm fully aware, is that if we don't go into session before getting the MOU and before the nominee expires, then he will just expire.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Take
thank you
us
for also
down.
giving me the opportunity to make that very clear for the record. I then move that we proceed to the voting file.
On that motion, then, without any objections, so ordered. We are in the voting file, and the only bill on the agenda is Bill 184, as substituted by the committee. I'm going to ask the clerk if he can please read the bill.
Bill number 184-31, LS, as substituted by the Committee on Appropriations, Taxation, Banking, Insurance, Retirement, and Land, introduced by the Committee on Rules, Federal, Foreign, and Micronesian Affairs and Human and Natural Resources at the request of Imagalahing Guahan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam. An act to provide additional appropriation authorization for the Governor of Guam employee and retiree health insurance for fiscal year ending September 30, 2011, and other purposes. This act shall be known as the Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2011.
Roll call.
Senator Tom Ada. Senator Tony Ada.
Yes.
Senator Blas. Vice Speaker Cruz. Senator Dueñas. Senator Guthertz. Senator Mabini. Senator Munya Barnes. Senator Palacios. Senator Pangilinan. Senator Respicio. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Silva Tyron. Speaker Wampat.
I'm good.
Senator Yamashita.
Substitute Bill number 184-31 COR received 12 yea votes, 3 excused absence. Substitute Bill number 184-31 is duly passed by this body. Yeah, we've just, that was the only bill to vote on, but we do have, and I did mention this earlier, if anyone would like to use this opportunity for any brief extension of remarks. None? So, Senator Respicio on a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that we adjourn, subject to the call of the Speaker.
On that motion, without any objection, this legislature is adjourned, subject to the call of the Speaker.